see it. Just remind you, I'm not sure if this is your first Twitter files, but I'm guessing it's not. The file is pinned above. We're going to go through it as usual and discuss it all together in a balanced way as usual. Make sure you give us your questions, any comments, any questions at all. Bottom right corner in that purple circle. And we've got a great panel for you. And we've got Aaron and Nelson, who I don't think spoken yet. Want to welcome them because I haven't had the chance to speak, and all other speakers as well. But Ian,
Yep.
I'll let you summarize the first article that was sent about 2 hours ago as a preparation, and then
Yeah.
name redacted. Feel free to kind of fill the gaps, and then we'll kick off the thread as always. And guys, as usual, just jump in or put your hand up whenever.
Okay. Okay. First of all, it's a fairly long article. I recommend you read it later on when you have the time. But here's a summary of what the Twitter Files thread is about. It's basically about state-funded digital blacklisting campaigns. It's something like the Disinformation Governance Board that was founded by the Department of Homeland Security, and later, people talked about it. Jack Posobiec brought it to light, and then it basically got shut down, right? Because people didn't like it. It was, essentially 1984. So, unfortunately, there is an organization called the Global Engagement Center, and that has been going on for quite a while. Originally, it was established by Barack Obama as a to counter international terrorist organizations and diminish their influence. This was, you know, obviously it had good motives, noble motives. They wanted to counter ISIS because ISIS was propagandizing on social media, not just Twitter, but everywhere, right? They were posting videos of their crap and then recruiting people to go fight in war zones in Syria and so on, right? Where they were fighting against Assad or against US forces. And so that was what it was founded for by Barack Obama. And so the GEC funded a secret list of contractors who sent companies like Twitter reports on foreign ecosystems, which in practice were essentially blacklists. This is what they did. Primarily, this was their job. The GEC's blacklisting, primarily, unfortunately, targeted American conservatives, but also targeted left-friendly movements and socialist media outlets, sites like the Gray Zone, for example. People like Jimmy Dore, right? Their followers were targeted. I'm not saying that they necessarily targeted those people, but people like that, right? The dissident left, I would say, as well as the right, obviously. Now, most of these experts who are working in disinformation studies laboratories or think tanks, right? They know nothing about identifying true bad actors. This is something that Matt Taibbi talks about extensively in the article. And he explains how these people are not really qualified to do their jobs. They're just there because, they have a reputation for being disinformation experts. People like, I don't know, Alessandra Caraballo, right? Esquire, for example. That is the type of person that they would pick to, run these things. Now, Twitter executives, they lost their fucking minds when Sheila Frankel of the New York Times wrote to them, right, to Twitter, to ask why they hadn't hired any independent researchers to help Twitter better understand its own business. They understandably upset them because it's like, hey, we know how to run our own business. Stop telling us how to do our jobs, right? But the New York Times thinks that, these organizations seem to know better. Now, the
So
GEC's
just quickly,
focus, yeah,
before you continue, Ian, so just two interesting points here. You said that they targeted the left as well as the right, right
that is
more
right,
than the
yeah.
left, but it
I
seems to
would say
be
the right more than the left. Yeah, the right more than the
but we
left. I
didn't.
mean,
We didn't see the bias that we saw later on yet. So it's like the early
right.
stages, and we saw
This
even
is
the
the
New
early
York Times
stages.
even
They were
criticize it.
targeting Bernie bros, right? That's basically what it comes down to. They were targeting people who, like right now, what's that guy's name? Jackson Hinkle, for example, right? They were targeting people like that, right? Because he was on the left. Now he's, I don't know, weird, pro-Russia or something. But they were targeting people who are ostensibly on the left who are not pro-establishment because they were not targeting, people like Aaron Rupar. He is on the left, but he's a liberal shill, right? So they were not targeting people like him. They were going after people like Jimmy Dore, people, who on the left who spoke out against war. They were going against people like that because, obviously they're a threat to the establishment. So that's your first question. What was your second question?
That was interesting that New York Times criticized Twitter. Not
Yeah.
Twitter, criticized Twitter. Exactly.
This is a Twitter. Yeah, they're like, hey, why don't you hire some of these so-called experts to go work for you? You don't seem to understand your own business. Why don't you shut down more disinformation? Bunch of clowns.
So can I add more to that article
Yeah.
So
Yeah, go
basically the article he put out before this Twitter file drop that kind of gave a summary. The background of it is an executive order that was put out by Barack Obama, looks like in 2016, which actually establishes the Global Engagement Center. And the point of the whole premise of establishing this GEC was to they were directed to counter messaging and diminish the influence of communications of ISIL, ISIS, or Al Qaeda. So that was the whole point of the GEC to begin with. But inside this executive order, let's see, Section 3B, the U.S. strategic counter, they were directed to to basically come up with counterterrorism narratives and communicate that. They were ordered to direct their communications towards foreign audiences abroad to counter the messaging and diminish the influence. And then where we get into this issue that now relates back to censorship of somewhat domestic people under the basis of them pushing or amplifying, say, foreign actors, like Russia would put something out that, the GEC or another, intel agency would identify as, say, a disinformation campaign. So they would use that as an excuse to diminish or suspend accounts because, domestically that they were accusing of promoting, something that the Russians, they would say. So in this executive order, the GEC was given authorization to consult and engage with private sector, civil society, academia, and NGOs. So that's where you get into these other third-party outside groups that are compiling all this data, sending it back to the GEC, and that's where we get into, basically censorship of Americans that they're accusing or saying they're spreading Russia disinfo, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Yeah, essentially, if you, I don't know, publish a video by RT or something, right? And they don't like it because it counters whatever narrative they're trying to push. For instance, Nord Stream. If you were to, put something out and say, "Hey, America did Nord Stream," which, by the way, it probably did, they'd say, "Oh, that's disinformation. Russia bombed itself." That's the narrative they want you to stick to.
Yeah,
So
basically,
that's the kind of stuff they would target.
The GEC was given this, they were established, given this, sort of first directive to counter basically counter what ISIS and Al Qaeda was put out, but it was left open-ended with all these contractors they were given the authority to hire.
It's feature creep.
And then it turned back basically and onto domestic type stuff. So.
Yeah,
from what you've read, Ian, does it seem like it's it was accidental? Because the article does not
it's
indicate
not accidental. It's feature creep, right? So it's like the OSS in World War II. They were founded to fight the Nazis, right? To counter Nazi propaganda, in the West, for example, right?
But it was not intentionally created for censoring domestic.
No. That came later. Yeah, because when you have a lot of. That's right. Yeah, like with the OSS, like I said, with the OSS, it's founded to stop the Nazis, and they did. They did a tremendously good job. They fought the Nazis and they won. Intelligence-wise, they managed to counter their efforts. And then after the war ended, they were like, okay, what do we do now? We want to still keep getting funded. We want to keep getting paychecks. Well, we got to find a new enemy. I don't know. Let's target the Soviet Union. This is why, the Cold War happened, right? The USSR and the US were not fucking enemies for 2 decades, 3 decades when they were founded in 1918. They were not enemies of the US. And then afterwards, after the Cold War ended, the World War II ended, they're like, oh shit, we don't have anything else to do. I guess we should start, focusing our efforts on other people, let's counter them. We need to justify our jobs. And that in turn, helped to create the U.S. military industrial complex. Now that's a whole history lesson. I'm not going to go into it, but that's basically, U.S. military industrial complex gone rampant, right? It starts, hey, we want to stop World War II, we want to fight the Nazis, fight the Japanese. After that ends, it's like, okay, what do we do now? We've got this massive industry and we need to keep it going because this is propping up our industry and it's making us millionaires, right? Same thing here with the GEC. You fight ISIS, you fight Al Qaeda. Great, cool, good job. Afterwards, you're like, oh, what do we do now? Let's fight the Russians. Let's fight domestic terrorists. Let's fight MAGA insurgents. That's basically what happened. And, they turned their gaze inward, which that's what the GEC did. Yeah.
Do you want to kick off the thread? Because I know there's a lot of tweets there.
There's a couple of more points I want to go over the article, and then I'll start the thing. Yeah. So as Matt Taibbi describes in the article, the GEC's focus shifted from counterterrorism to disinformation. First, it was, fight ISIS, and then it became disinformation. As Name Redacted said, they went after the Russians, or at least, claimed that everything was Russian disinformation, and then the infrastructure of disinformation labs that grew around it. So this became a cottage industry where, so-called experts would be recruited, and, it's in their interest to basically produce boogeyman, right? This is what happened. Now, the article highlights how, these blacklisting schemes include ordinary Americans, often with the same political leanings as the supposed foreign disinformationists. As Name Redacted said, they went after people who were, I don't know, just retweeting articles or tweeting out stuff that just didn't fit the narrative, right? Now, the blacklisting organizations that were employed by the GEC are extremely expansive definitions of hate speech, right? And the way that they identify spam is not something that, is extremely opaque. They don't really have a method. They just see, this person follows X, Y, and Z accounts, and that person's already on the list, so let's put them on the list as disinformation activists, right? That's what they'll do. And so the inferences are enough for the innumerable centers for countering whatever. For instance, Center for Countering Digital Hate as a UK-based group, and now there's one that's being headed up by Nina Jankowski. That's a Center for Democracy or something, right? All these organizations were founded with their, for the sole purpose nowadays, right, of deplatforming and disenfranchising any domestic organization or nationalist group, right? For instance, USAID is going after Hungary, right? They're targeting the Hungarian government, which is a democratically elected government. I don't care what you say about it. It is, right? They don't like what Orban is doing because he doesn't support NATO's narrative. So they're like, we got to take him down. This is what they're focused on right now, right? So it's all about pushing a certain narrative. So anyway, that's the article, and I want to start reading the full piece now, if I can.
Yeah, kick it off, man, because I know there's a lot of tweets there, and then we can go through we go through a section, and we can just all discuss it, and then go through the next section.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, so Matt Taibbi, Twitter Files in number 17. The title is New Knowledge, the Global Engagement Center, and State-Sponsored Blacklists. He details that on June 8, 2021, an analyst at the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab wrote to Twitter, saying, "Hi guys, attached you will find 40,000 Twitter accounts that our researchers suspect are engaging in inauthentic behavior and Hindu nationalism more broadly." So keep in mind here, what's going on in India. They don't like Modi, right? President Modi is not pro-US, he's not pro-anything, he's just pro-India. And so they wanted someone who's under their control, and so they identified him, his people, his followers as being what do they call it? Inauthentic behavior, just to try to shut them down, right? And the email is from Andy Carvin at Atlantic Council. He emails it to a bunch of people at Twitter, including Yoel Roth, and says, "Hi guys, attached you'll find a spreadsheet of around 40,000 Twitter accounts that our researchers suspect are engaging in inauthentic behavior in support of the BJP, that's Modi's party, and Hindu nationalism more broadly." And that's one of the things that they put out. The DFR lab, which is the Digital Forensic Lab at Atlantic Council, said it suspected 40,000 accounts of being paid employees or possibly volunteers of India's Bharatiya Janata Party. But the list was full of ordinary Americans, many with no connection to India or any clue about Indian politics. This is where we see the cracks.
But I don't get it. Even if they're part of Indian politics, what does that have to do with anything?
According to this stupid organization, which is really dumb, I gotta emphasize that, is that they claim they were engaging in inauthentic behavior. They didn't really clarify how exactly it's inauthentic. It's extremely opaque. They just put a bunch of people on a list and said that these people are working for the Indian government.
And by the way, I might throw in here real quick, and when it comes to India, there still is a lingering Cold War feeling in American diplomacy that India, which was somewhat aligned with Russia during the Cold War, that they can't be trusted. I mean, Donald Trump changed that a little bit, but keep that in mind. That kind of flavors the India part of it a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, that's where the Atlantic Council comes in from.
Okay.
So
yes, a lot of that. I was about to say, a lot of that basically stems from the fact of, the sort of BRICS alliance kind of combats, bringing them more so into the Western global sphere. So really, they feel as if since the ruling party, Modi's party basically is in charge, they arbitrarily deem that any kind of sentiments of nationalism in India are basically doing part to that, and not because a whole broader base, they assume that they want to be a part of the Western Anglosphere.
So hold on, I
Yes.
don't get it. So they're essentially censoring based on political ideology in India and not based on the request of the government?
Loosely, it's loosely political ideology, but mainly because they think that, again, it's funded and that it's manipulation by bot accounts that are actually paid, if you will, shills. So basically
Ah,
they're
okay,
trying
okay,
to,
okay.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
trying to
Okay.
expand that definition.
And there's no
Okay.
evidence that any of these people are paid shills. If you look through the
But they
list, which
even,
he,
but hold on, but ignore their paid shills. These are American people.
yeah,
Yet
these
they
are
thought they
American
were,
people, and they're not paid shills, by the way. This is just a scattershot list, right? 40,000 accounts. I'm sure some of them are Indian accounts. I'm sure some of them are pro-government accounts, but a lot of them, and he provides examples here, are just actually American users. They're just American users. Maybe they retweeted something, and that put them on a list. It's insane, right? And this tends to be a pattern of behavior when it comes to these think tanks like the Atlantic Council, is that they're deliberately targeting any sort of nationalist or populist movement in the world, be it in, say, Serbia or Montenegro, or in nowadays it's going to be Hungary, right? They're targeting Hungarians. But before they were targeting Bolsonaro supporters, right? They claimed that those guys were inauthentic because,
And,
they support
and it's very
Bolsonaro. How dare they?
McCarthyistic. It's just stirring up fear in an irrational way and throwing people in when it politically benefits you. Like McCarthyism, yeah, there are probably some people who are kind of really dangerous, but there are a whole lot of people just thrown in because they went after him politically. Again, mission creep, like Ian was talking about before.
Yeah. And
all right, we'll
beyond
continue
that,
with the 13.
the reason they go after this, and to offer people some context here, right, our listeners, they may be wondering, why are they going after people like Bolsonaro, Modi, or Orban, right? Or even Putin to that extent. It's because these people, these governments, these populist governments are, they're part of what you would say a multipolar world order versus a unipolar world order, right? And America, together with the WEF, right, the World Economic Forum, uh, has this idea that the whole world is going to be one world government, right? The liberal world order, as Biden himself has said. That's how he described it, the liberal world order. So when you have these other governments that are protecting their own sovereignty, for instance, Bolsonaro wants to have an independent Brazil, a Brazil for Brazilians, Brazil first, or Orban, who is interested in protecting his people and not opening up the borders to, I don't know, a million immigrants, for example. He wants Hungary for Hungarians and Hungarian culture. That stands in the way of the this globalist world order, right? And that's the reason why they've been targeting all of these governments, and in a lot of cases they've been trying to stage color revolutions, right, where they will literally try to overthrow the government. Not a lot of it has been successful. Like in Kazakhstan, they tried that. It wasn't successful. That was last year or 2 years ago. Yeah, that wasn't successful. They tried the same thing in Belarus, and that wasn't successful. But they are trying to overthrow all these governments that stand in the way of the globalist order, right? So that's to give you some context as to why they're targeting these people. And Modi's government is a pretty prime example of that. It's a sovereign state. He doesn't abide by American orders. He doesn't take commands from Biden or anybody else. He is his own man, right? And they don't like that. They managed to successfully overthrow Pakistan's leader, right? Salman Khan, right? The cricket player. And because he's a populist leader, they replaced him with a puppet, right? And now that, turmoil in Pakistan as a result. So I'll continue the thread. You can unmute people if you want. You press the unmute button. Yeah. Quote, a person named Bobby Hailstone talked to Matt Taibbi. He was on this list, and he said, I have no connection to any Hindu folks, just a Reagan Republican here in Connecticut. Right? Another user named Lady Di 816 said, a Hindu nationalist? I've never been out of this country, let alone the state of New Jersey. And another one, Krista Woods, she said, these people are insane. These are people that Matt Taibbi has been, contacting with because he found him on the list, and he's been putting out tweets over the past few weeks saying, hey, I want to talk to you if you're on this list. So Twitter agreed. One reason many of the accounts remain active, right? Twitter actually agreed with that these accounts are not like bot accounts or anything. Thanks, Andy, replied Trust and Safety Chief Yoel Roth. I spot checked a number of these accounts, and virtually all appear to be real people. So, yeah, this idea that they're not, that they're all like bot accounts, nonsense. The Atlantic Council is doing this McCarthyism, as Jim said, right? So there's an actual list. It's a number 6. If you want to pin number 6 into the thing, you can actually see if you're on it. You can actually check to see if you're on the list because he published the entire list. It's massive. It's 40,000 names. I can't even open it right now because it's like super big. So if anyone wants to read it, you want to check you're on the list, check tweet number 6. Now, Matt, he continues, number 7, the DFR lab, again, that's Atlantic Council, is funded by the US government, specifically the Global Engagement Center, that's the GEC, right? Dr. Graham Brookie denies that the DFR lab it uses tax money to track Americans. They're denying it. They're saying, oh, we're not tracking Americans. And it says that the GEC grants have, quote, an exclusively international focus. This is what they claim. Obviously, that's not true, given that they put Americans on this list. So, number 8, as Matt Taibbi explains, Americans who are on the DFR's list, such as Maricel Urbanek, are unconvinced that its focus is exclusively international. This is un-American, she said, and she's a Cuban American. She said they do this in places that don't believe in free speech. This is a conservative. She goes by the name Jersey Girl. She's a full MAGA supporter, Christian conservative, Donald J. Trump supporter. Build a wall, that's all in her profile, her bio. So this is a true-blooded American, right? And she was one of the people on that list. Matt Taibbi continues, he says, the Global Engagement Center is usually listed as a State Department entity. It's not, right? It's not State Department entity. It is created in Obama's last year, 2016. GEC is an interagency group within the State Department, whose initial partners included the FBI, the DHS, NSA, CIA, DARPA, Special Operations Command, that's SOCOM, and a bunch of others, right? He actually has a whole list of them, including USAID, right? So remember USAID. Yep. Number 10. The GEC's mandate, according to its own website, is, quote, to recognize, understand, expose, and counter foreign, quote-unquote, disinformation, right? Actually, not in quotes. It just says disinformation. Now, on the surface, it's the same mission that the United States Information Agency, or USIA, has fulfilled for decades, but with a catch. The USIA focused on foreign disinformation. The GEC's focus is a lot wider. Matt explains, he says, quote, it's an incubator for the domestic disinformation complex, says a former intelligence source. This is someone who's close to the GEC. Explained to Matt Taibbi what it actually does. And the quote continues, he says, all the shit we pulled in other countries since the Cold War, some morons decided to bring back home. That's a pretty good quote. Number 12. The GEC could have avoided controversy by focusing on exposing or answering disinformation with research and a more public approach, as the USIA did. They're extremely transparent about what they did. It funded a secret list of subcontractors and helped pioneer an insidious and idiotic new form of blacklisting. This is what they did, right? And number 13. Here, the GEC asks Twitter to review 499 accounts as foreign disinformation for reasons that include using Signal to communicate and tweeting the hashtag Iranians debate with Biden. So if you use Signal, like you tweeted, hey, I use Signal. Oh, boom, you're on a list. That's pretty stupid. If you're a Iranian, and I don't know, you're American and you're tweeting about Iran, how dare you? You're now a foreign disinformation agent, right? Because you used the hashtag. This is what put them on the list. It's so stupid. So here are 5,500.
Ian, what's that list? If you use Signal, are you on the list where they check whether to shadow ban you?
No, it's not like you just tweeted about it. You just tweeted and you said, hey, I use Signal. Boom, you're on a list. This is how stupid they are. The GEC's blacklist. They wanted Twitter to ban you for even, because in their eyes, you're a foreign disinformation agent because you're using Signal. So anybody in this chat room, you ever tweeted about Signal, maybe you're on a list, That's how stupid this is. Yeah, it's insane. It's, as Jim said, McCarthyism gone nuts to a whole nother level. We always refer to McCarthyism, nowadays we're like, oh, McCarthyism is so bad. They made a whole blacklist of 60 people on it. This has thousands of names of random people, mostly Americans and some non-Americans, being put on a list and classified as a foreign disinformation operative because these idiots, they didn't do their jobs, they didn't do their due diligence, and decided that you were a bot or that you were a spy or whatever, and there's no proof that you were, right? This is what they did. So Matt continues, number 14, it says, here are 5,500 names that the GEC told Twitter it believed were, quote, Chinese accounts, end quote, engaged in, quote, state-backed coordinated manipulation. It takes about a negative 10 seconds to find non-Chinese figures. So if you actually look through the list, you'll see that most of these accounts are American. There's one called Game of Thrones 911. Wow, okay. Some of these are obviously Chinese, right? Obviously Chinese, but there's a lot of non-Chinese as well. They're all on this stupid list. Now, the GEC's Chinese list included multiple Western government accounts and at least 3 CNN employees. 3 CNN employees are listed on here. That is insane, right? According to Twitter's Patrick Conlon, who, in an email, because they shot it down. Twitter shot it down. They were like, this is ridiculous. They said, not exactly Anderson's besties, referring to Anderson Cooper, but CNN assets, if you will. A total crock, replied Yoel Roth, right? So Twitter's making fun of this. Twitter's making fun of the GEC because they're insane. Yoel Roth says, OMG, really important to highlight this. What a total crock. So they got, the GEC emailed them this list, and Twitter's like, what the hell? Right? So the GEC passed some good information to Twitter, but mostly it wasn't. Right? Mostly not. That's what Matt says. And the root problem was exemplified by a much circulated 2020 report called Russian Pillars of Disinformation and Propaganda. This was released by the U.S. State Department and worked on by the GEC, and it's got a little infographic with, it's got spreads. It says, for instance, in January 2020, Zvezda TV interviews an expert, and then Zhirinovsky makes a claim, proxy sites amplify, narrative spreads on social media, and then RT and Sputnik amplify. And then according to the GEC, the narrative begins to diffuse into information environment in February. And it looks like a bunch of viruses or something. It's so silly. And it says, at this point, the narrative, and this is in March, has diffused into the information environment. So basically, they're just kind of, shooting their shit here. They have no idea what's really going on. They have no idea the tracking of this stuff. They're just deciding, oh yeah, this is what happened, right? Somebody releases an interview, it gets spread, and they decide, oh, everybody who spread it's a bot. Yeah, this is like having Keith Olbermann run an organization that is, determined to find spies. Everybody's going to be a spy according to that guy, right?
Ian, are you referencing the incompetence or the psychosis? Which one?
Both. That's the issue.
Just
right?
yes.
Yep. Just the answer is yes. Yeah. So number 17, Matt goes on. He says, this GEC report was contradictory. On one hand, it offered reasoned evidence that a specific outlet like the Strategic Culture Foundation was partnered with the Russian Foreign Ministry, which would make it a true proxy site. And the summary of this, this is something that the GEC put out. Sorry, this is something that the Strategic Culture Foundation, it says here that it's an online journal registered in Russia, directed by Russia's SVR. It's closely aligned with the MFA, which is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The outlet plays a central role among a group of linked websites that proliferate Russian disinformation and propaganda. This is according to the GEC. One of the core tactics is to attract authors who are Western fringe thinkers and conspiracy theorists, giving them a broader platform and obscuring the Russian origins of the journal. This tactic helps the site appear to be an organic voice within its target audience of Westerners. This is according to the GEC. Now, this is part of the report, right? And Matt continues in number 18. He says, the same report advanced a far lazier idea. So the first part is probably true, but then they just got sloppy. They say, along with state actors, groups that generate their own momentum should also be seen as parts of the propaganda ecosystem. This is where the feature creep comes in, right? So independents, according to GGC, should not confuse those trying to discern the truth, right? And this is a long thing. I'm not going to read it necessarily, but basically what they claim, I'm going to distill it here, is that the GEC developed something called the ecosystem context. So essentially anyone who shares, a tweet or retweets something or puts out a link that is flagged by these clowns is going to be flagged as part of this ecosystem. They're going to claim that you're, part of this organization. That's the reason why, like CNN assets, like three employees at CNN who work in China were flagged as disinformation because they probably tweeted out a link that was from the Chinese government, right? The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for instance. That would flag them because they put that out there. Oh my God, they can't even talk about it. So now they're bots.
Can I say something, Ian?
Go for it.
This is literally a lot of this focuses on, okay, well, the intelligence community is only really authorized to look at foreign, intelligence. They can't, and they can censor foreign sponsored stuff, right? If Russia's putting stuff out. But this is exactly how they get around that and apply it to domestic, where they'll label something as Russia disinformation and then put out these lists with a ton of Americans on them. And this is a perfect example.
Yep. I want to go to Aaron.
Yeah, there was a similar foreign to domestic pivot of another important government agency the following year in 2017, 2018. So timeline here, the Twitter Files GEC information looks like it's around 2016, so Obama's still in office. Then after the sort of populist uprising of 2016 in the form of Trump and Brexit, there was another agency that was stood up called the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. CISA seems to be at the center of the current censorship regime at the federal level. But their initial mission was to counter computer viruses. So they were supposed to protect our digital and critical infrastructure from cyber attacks and things of that nature. But about a year into their existence, they decided that they were then responsible for protecting what they euphemistically called our cognitive infrastructure. And you might wonder, what is our cognitive infrastructure? I mean, I know what the internet is. I know what, servers are, and that we should protect them from cyber attacks. Our cognitive infrastructure is the thoughts inside your head. And the threats to the thoughts inside your head, according to CISA, were bad information. And so they very quickly pivoted to disinformation, misinformation, and they made no distinction between foreign and domestic actors either. And so almost seamlessly, they made the same pivot that we saw here with GEC. So this seems to be a pattern that has occurred probably starting around 2016, 2017, where government agencies that were given one reasonable mandate decided, after they got used to doing what they were doing, decided that, if we're doing this to foreign accounts or foreign actors, then if there's people domestically that are, in our view, dangerous in the same way, why not turn our work, our abilities, our power against them? So what I find interesting about this Twitter Files post is it's another example of what's starting to look like a pattern involving many different government agencies that have kind of grown and metastasized into where we are today with this censorship regime that involves probably at least 17, at my last count, 17 different federal agencies.
So one
So
thing,
part of your question.
one thing in tweet number 18 that Ian's going under, that picture, the third picture where it sort of gives the GEC pillars of Russia disinformation. If you look in the middle column, cultivation of proxy sources, this is how they pivot to censoring, basically Americans. If you go on the bottom, it's and the language they use is unwitting proliferators of Russia narratives. That means basically any domestic account. That's why they have these lists of thousands of people, and that's the guideline they use.
If you go even one
criminals.
over, it says infiltration of domestic conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's part of the weaponization of social media. So, like right now on Twitter, you can see people talking about Nord Stream, for example. They will claim that is an unwitting proliferation of Russian narratives, because how dare people point out what is true, right? You point out that.
So you can be guilty without being aware of it. You can be guilty without any intention to spread misinformation. Yep. You can be guilty simply if your thoughts happen to align with the thoughts of foreign actors that someone in a government agency doesn't like.
I want to ask a question. And I don't want an answer now, just for the panelists. And we'll probably do this in the next space. We'll do a Name Redacted in a few days on censorship and Name Redacted's findings. But I've got a question. I can come up with many examples where misinformation led to some crazy shit. For example, misinformation about witches existing in a village centuries ago and burning those people alive just because people thought there's witches there. I know that's an extreme example.
Or even something more current, right? Like Sandy Hook, when people on 4chan claimed it was a hoax and that, all these people were paid actors or something.
Or something I've noticed, Ian, is I think I have a tweet scheduled about this, or I'm going to be tweeting about this next couple of days. I've noticed that tweets that are like similar to that tweet by that guy of showing a double of Zelensky, which everyone thought was like, that's a copy of Zelensky when it was his bodyguard. And so I've noticed that tweet or someone else came up with tweets of before and after of Ukraine, but then showing that the before and after all the images are bullshit. It's all fake. Like I know it's fake because I've been, a lot of people have been to Ukraine. I'll be going there soon. We all like, this is crazy to think that all the damage is being faked. This is insane. But then he's
Yeah.
got these photos of before and after. If that, and I'm seeing that these type of tweets have that massive impact. People don't have time to vet it, and they don't have time to check if Zelensky's guy in the background is the bodyguard. Like, they reply to in their mind, it's in their mind, imprinted, and they move on with their life. And I've seen that tweets with misinformation that has that impact, that wow factor, tends to go viral. And I think a lot of people that are tweeting it know it's fake, but because it's getting them so much traction, they tweet it anyway
You keep it
just
up.
for the reach. Yeah. And they keep it up knowing it's wrong just because it's getting reach, or they remove it after the reach is done. They've gotten all the benefits. So my point is, and the question again, not for now, and it's a good question. That for the audience, I'd love your take in the bottom right corner in the comments on this particular question. Is there a place for censoring misinformation? Because we also know the risks.
No, because people have a right to be wrong, and they have the ability to seek out the truth on their own if they choose to. If people choose to believe stupid things, that's on them. It
But
should
they don't
not be a
choose to.
crime.
But they don't choose to when they don't have time to check
Well,
those things. Some people
my
don't.
suggestion is that the only way to solve this is through more free speech. So, the Stu Peters thing, for example, which is a stupid tweet, saying that Ukraine's not facing a war, that the whole thing's fake, blah, 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 right? That is one example. You can see Aaron Rupar doing stuff on the other side where he, tweets out something out of context about DeSantis or Trump or whoever, right? And people believe it. Thousands of people believe the lie. Now, I think that the only way to counter these people, these disinformation activists, if you will, what they're doing is actually disinformation. It's not, it's not like, oh, we accidentally put out something that was bullshit. They know what they're doing, right? The only way to counter it is through truth. You have to counter them. Like, if you see someone think something that's obviously a lie and you know it to be untrue, call it out. That's your job. Call it out. Like, you have a duty to tell the truth. It doesn't matter if you don't think you're going to get a lot of, traction for it, but you have to do it.
Where were the community notes on the Zelensky double and those images, the fake images of before and after?
I think it was added later on. Yeah, it got added eventually.
Okay, so I don't want to open up.
That's part of the challenge, though, Mario, is that, again, we can see that there's obviously a need to, provide a proper pushback, but see, every bit of misinformation people are exposed to is an opportunity for growth and for people to sort of learn how to disseminate between those things. And see, when you purposely curate entities that block misinformation, you remove that ability from the people. They don't know how to get outside information. And that's where the algorithms are really supposed to help with providing alternate and, combating opinions. That's where that's supposed to help. And it's still a work in progress. We're still working on this, but you don't swing hard in the other way, because then you provide a mechanism for abuse, as we're seeing here.
Question I want to add to that. Yeah. So you go first. What's the question?
I'm gonna. It's not a question. It's I want to kind of move on. But
no, I mean Malcolm. Malcolm said
go ahead, Malcolm.
said he wanted to ask a question. What's the question you wanted to ask to the audience?
Just to sort of help frame this is, we don't know what the communications with these organizations that are basically providing this information to the intelligence communities are. What if there are Congress people's fingerprints on this, particularly people within the intelligence, committees that are basically asking and requesting or tipping these agencies off to do this? That's the missing connector. So what if that's the case? Then how does that change the actionability of this report?
Yep. And I'd also like to add before you go, I want to add that the problem with, having a group of watchmen, and this is, these people like the watchmen, right? They decide what is true and what is not. Who watches the watchmen, right? What happens when they start lying? And you're depending on them to tell the truth. You're depending on them to counter so-called disinformation. But what happens when they decide that the truth is disinformation and that the only, acceptable reality is the one they put out? And that's exactly the problem right now with these organizations like the GEC, is that they're lying to people. So when people tell the truth, they're saying, no, you're putting out disinformation and we're going to censor you. This is the problem. This is why you can't censor people.
I just want to add, I think an expansion of community notes on Twitter, I think that can help combat it in some respect. I hope we see that soon, because I do think that a Wikipedia-like I guess, feedback system on tweets could work. And I know some people attack Wikipedia, but overall Wikipedia is pretty factual.
Well, it would be helpful.
Decentralizing.
Community notes would be helpful if they allowed the tweets to stay up, right? That's the whole issue.
Yeah, no,
they do.
Yeah, they have to stay up.
But
they
also,
can't take them down.
but the issue with community notes is they come in too late, and most people, the reach, like 80% of the reach, 90% of the reach would have already been done, and then community notes pop up. But I think I'm gonna do this.
Here's a suggestion. Here was a suggestion that I actually saw. People tweet at Elon. I forget who exactly said it, but when a community note is added onto a tweet that you've already liked or retweeted, it should inform you. Like it should, if you like somebody's tweet, let's say you like this stupid tweet about Ukraine not being a real war 2 days ago, and then a community note was added today, now, right? You should get a notification that there.
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
That'd be a good way to reach at least like 50% of people. Yeah.
Put a note about it, either DM it or tweet it to Elon. It's a really interesting point.
That's something Facebook actually said they do around, when they censor or on posts about, say, COVID. That guy, Aaron Berman, said that they will reach out to users that shared those posts or like them and provide them, with the correct information. So it's something Facebook already does.
That's something Twitter needs to do. Yeah, obviously they need more manpower to actually build a system in, but I think that would be a good move forward. That way people are not kept in the dark. Right? You accidentally like a stupid tweet, you should know that this was false.
Yes, I'm going to do one thing before we continue through the tweets. I'm for the censorship space in a week or so. I think it's on Tuesday or something. What I'm going to do is I want to take the position of kind of making an argument for censorship because nobody really is.
Well, everyone's going to hate you, Mario. You shouldn't do that. You should actually find someone who is pro censorship.
No, I'm actually going to do it. Fuck it. I'm going to have fun with this.
Because people are going to hate you. They'll be like, you can't trust this guy. He works at the WEF. I mean, do you really want that reputation? You might not be the best person for this.
I think my audience knows me by now. Like, I just try to play devil's advocate at times.
I would hope so.
Because I'm gonna make the imagine I score something crazy just to have fun, and then people just clip it and use it against me. Like I go with something like humans are stupid and should be censored, and then everyone just clips that and uses it against me.
Yeah, they make a YouTube video about you or something, like a dozen YouTube videos. It'd be like, don't trust Mario Nawfal. He works for the WEF, and he's calling on censorship, mass censorship of people for wrong things.
By the way,
this is what we're fighting against.
Disclaimer for anyone, I actually don't work at the WEF, and I've only been to Davos, not the World Economic Forum itself, at a side event that's related to crypto.
Yeah, that's what.
But anyway,
Mario, I would actually join you to argue that there should be censorship, not because I believe that, but I can actually put up arguments that would make it harder to argue against.
Done, Laura. You're gonna take the hate off me. Perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, devil's advocate.
I'm used to the hate. It's all good.
Awesome. I've been trying to get someone from the social. We're going to continue the thread, everyone. But I'm trying to get someone from the social media platforms. If anyone can help me get someone from from Meta or Twitter or any of the others to talk about why they censor or not because of legal requirements, but why they think censorship is needed and the negative effect of censorship. Maybe there's something we're missing. Maybe there's studies we're missing. I'm very curious. I still think, Laura, I'd love you in that space, by the way. Please hit me up. I
want to tell you something though. Caroline was just here who worked at Twitter longer than anyone, but she's left and she could have told you why they censor easily.
Can you DM me Caroline's username, please? I'd love to invite her.
I'll just let her know to come back.
Yeah, perfect. And send me her details just for the space next week.
Yeah, for the future space. Because we're not going to do that here. Yeah, we're not going to do.
I don't know if Caroline will actually. I don't know if she'll actually talk, guys, but she's the person who was the first original employee at Twitter, and she did all the verifications up until just before Elon took over. So, and she's the person who to talk to if you want to talk to about that. Perfect. I don't know if she'll talk, but I'll let you know.
She might. We'll tell her it will be nice.
I'd love to just have a private call with as well, Laura. But again, let's continue the thread, man. We kind of digressed a bit, but I want
Yeah, we
anyone
did.
in the audience. I genuinely want your thoughts on censorship. Is there an argument for censorship? Even though I'm against it, by the way, I hate centralization of power. I think it's really
Having the debate
dangerous.
is important.
But
Having the
yeah,
conversation
yeah,
is
yeah.
important. I mean, you
But
can't fight against censorship if you don't know the arguments against it, right? People can bamboozle you. Like someone who's pro censorship, who knows who knows the score, who's knowledgeable about all of it, they can bamboozle you. That's why it's important to arm yourself, to equip yourself with this information, this knowledge, so that we can fight against censorship properly, intelligently, and convincingly. We want to convince the broader spectrum of humanity that censorship is bad. So this is the best way to do it, to equip yourself with the tools.
Likewise,
Censorship
there should
also
be a
makes
way.
society less safe.
Likewise, though, there should be a way to figure out how to recognize propaganda. So it'd be interesting to hear what tools people have to learn
Yep,
how to assess what's true.
that's right. Absolutely, because
well, let's
propaganda
kick it
does
off.
exist from all sides. Yeah, from all sides.
Which tweet are we up to, Ian?
19. So
Out of 50,
30.
yeah.
Yeah. So Matt goes, he says and this is something we talked about already, so we kind of covered it, but he says the ecosystem is not a new concept, right? It's been with us since Salem, right? Salem, the witch hunts. It's guilt by association. This is what the ecosystem actually is. As one Twitter executive puts it, and this is an email, he says, quote, if you retweet a news source that's linked to Russia, you become a Russian linked asset, whatever, right? Does not exactly resonate as a sound research approach. So he's slamming it. He's slamming the GEC, right? Because it's nonsense. The GEC sent Twitter a series of reports on a series of topics, often employing the ecosystem concept. Its report on France attributes membership in the Yellow Vest movement as being Russia-linked. And that's how Twitter's Aaron Roberts put it. So I'll read an analysis in 2019. This is December 26, 2019, sent by the GEC to Twitter, claiming that the Yellow Vest movement, which is a populist movement, it's working class. They were fighting against Macron. They didn't like his policies. They're saying that it's Russia linked. There's no evidence that they are, but the executive summary of this reads, and this is this is not super lengthy, but it goes, the report presents an analysis of cross-platform conversations on social media related to protests in France that took place in December 2019. Most posts were in French, suggesting the domestic audience was the focus of this campaign, which coincided with the one-year anniversary of the protests in Paris, France, in November and December 2018. By amplifying the anti-Macron narrative, the Kremlin continues to sow distrust in an attempt to discredit the French government and deepen divides in French society. The English language content depicted in the situation in France as unstable, with a hint of distrust in its current institutions. And the report says, a trusted partner analysis, this is the groups that worked with the GEC, they looked at 10,183 posts from 528 Russia-linked accounts, meaning someone who just retweeted a Russian once, your Russia-linked accounts, referring to the protests in France for 30 days starting on November 18, 2019. These accounts use the hashtags Gilets jaunes, Grieve, Acte, and Retraits. Of these 528 accounts, only 36 posted more than once per day, on an average producing 80% of the posts observed. Most posts were in French, but also included English and Italian. The French language content generally encouraged action and included sentiment opposing Macron's government, and the non-French content was generally aimed at convincing the non-French West supporters to oppose Macron, the French police, and the French government more broadly. Additional analysis of the top influential accounts identified that most of the content was produced in French. This indicates that the influence campaign was primarily focused on domestic audiences, such as France. The content of the top influencers was anti-Macron in nature and contained reposted content by Sputnik and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Yeah, it's funny. They claimed it was Russia-linked, but the reason why these accounts, which, by the way, are French, I'm looking at them right now, the reason why they posted content from Sputnik was because Sputnik had journalists on the ground that were taking footage of the protests. No one else wanted to cover it, and so they would post, stuff that's put out by Sputnik, and somehow that makes you Russia-linked. It's absurd. Personal story. When the 2020 BLM riots were happening, in Portland, for instance, they were, these Antifa riders were going after the federal courthouse in downtown Portland. And one of the things they did in one of the nights was to set a flame, right, to set fire to a stack of Bibles. This went viral, and the journalists who managed to capture that footage of Antifa, masked activists, taking the Bibles. I think they stole it from a church and lighting them on fire. Sputnik captured it on video. This was written about by other journalists. Other journalists saw it, but they didn't take footage. Sputnik put it out there on, and I saw it, right? Because, hey, it was out there. I tweeted it out. And the very next day, I get a call from the New York Times. The New York Times journalist wants to know where I got that video from. Was I given it by a Russian? Was I provided it? Was I paid to post it? No, I wasn't, right? and most people weren't. It was simply there. And yet they tried to paint it as Russian disinformation because it was so horrific. Oh my God, a stack of Bibles being set fire to by Antifa. It has to be fake, right? The idea was that Russia produced this domestically in Russia to create the impression that it was, that was happening in Portland. Now, obviously, that's not true because people attested to, people actually spoke to the New York Times.
But Ian, the media, the New York Times was just checking, no? They were just doing the DD.
Yeah, they're doing their job. So they actually did a pretty good job. They interviewed me and they interviewed a bunch of other people and they concluded, yes, that the stack of Bibles was in fact burned by Antifa. Now, they tried to water it down. They tried to claim that, the Antifa may not have known that they took a stack of Bibles. It's just a stack of books and that Russia seized upon the situation to inflame the protests. There's no evidence of that. Like those journalists from Sputnik or RT, I think in this case it was RT, they were there because, everybody was there. Everybody was covering it. Every single, you had people like Tim Pool basically were down there. Andy Ngo was down there, taking videos of all these things that were happening. Just because the fucking mainstream media was too busy not covering the stuff that looked violent doesn't mean it wasn't happening. We saw this a lot, right? This is something that a lot of journalists, like people in the conservative sphere, noticed that we would go down there. I think Nick can attest to that. Because he was actually on the ground in one of these places. I think he was in New York, where they would take footage. Independent journalists were taking videos of what was happening on the ground of, police officers being attacked, being, shot at with like BB guns or like, lasers being pointed into their eyes. It was something like 50 DHS agents were injured, right, by Antifa. And this is not really given a lot of coverage because the mainstream media, right, at least the people that they sent down there, like the journalists, kind of refused to capture any of this stuff. If they did capture footage, they didn't publish it, right? This is something I noticed with Getty Images, for example, where they didn't publish the stuff that was happening night after night. They would only show the more peaceful stuff. They might show the aftermath of, say, a Starbucks that got ransacked, but that was it. They wouldn't show them attacking police officers. A lot of the footage that happened in 2020 came from citizen journalists who were down there on the streets taking videos and taking photos of what was actually going on. It blew up on social media, but sites like Twitch actually actively suspended accounts that were posting any of this stuff because they probably got, they didn't want that, first of all, this very variety content, very violent stuff. But also they didn't want to put out this notion that the far left, the Antifa people, were performing any kind of violence, because for all intents and purposes, and this was broadly propagated by the mainstream media, by sites like Washington Post, the New York Times at the time. They were publishing pro-Antifa narratives claiming that these fucking black masked assholes were fighting for social justice and they were not injuring normal people, that, their targets it was a mostly peaceful protest, so to speak, right? This is the narrative. And so it's funny when Russian news organization goes down there, takes unbiased footage, suddenly it's Russian disinformation because, oh my God, people are actually seeing what's happening. Right. So anyway, sorry for the digression, but I just want to give you guys some context of how the mainstream media operates. All right. So going back to number 20 here, they're claiming, right? The GEC claims that the Russian linked accounts, again, Russian linked accounts are anybody who's ever retweeted RT, continue to sow discord in France. Like they basically tried to blame Russia for the Yellow Vest protests. No evidence of this actually being true, but they claimed here. And this is the third screenshot. It says Russia linked France. Did a few spam suspensions. None of these were suspicious. This is Twitter responding to it. And no, we are not going to remove or, ban Sputnik France. High volumes of tweets does not equal bots to us, and being a bot is not a term of service violation. This is what Twitter said. And they added, in terms of the French protests, pretty much the same accounts as the previous report, except this one now attributes membership in the Yellow Vest movement as being Russia linked. Again, I got to, remind people that the Yellow Vest movement was organic. It happened in France. People were pissed off at Macron. They still are. That's why they fucking protest every single week. But there's no evidence that it was Russia linked. But again, this is what the GEC claims. Like,
So was it intention? So did GEC intentionally claim it was Russia,
yeah, they
or it
malign
was
them. Yeah,
just
yes,
silly, intentional? So they knew it wasn't Russia, but they
because it's
still
a
tried to
populist
make it seem.
movement. Yeah, there's no
Yeah,
evidence
but
at all to suggest that it is, right?
yeah, but could it be just stupid labeling whenever someone like just this
I'm sure.
lazy?
I'm sure some people could be lazy, but I'm going to not ascribe stupidity to these guys. They know what they're doing. They're not stupid people. They're
Yeah.
not stupid people.
There's a common trend here, and it seems like anybody asking for, focusing on one's own citizens or asserting national sovereignty or anything that's not, wholly interventionalist and, that links up to, these post-national authorities is being branded as Russian, which honestly kind of makes Russia look like the good guys, even though, there's some pushback on that.
Yep. So MAGA, for instance, I mean, they claim that the MAGA movement was funded by Russia. This was something that Hillary Clinton said over and over and over again. They said that Donald Trump was elected in 2016 due to Russian efforts. There is zero evidence that Russia was involved in any of it. They claim that 4chan posts that the Pepe the Frog, Luis Mensch likes to claim that Pepe the Frog is actually a Russian creation. It's like, that is absurd. But this is what we're dealing with. These are smart people who are purposely using people's ignorance of Russia and they're blowing it out of proportion, claiming that Russia is capable of this superhuman ability
But
to
I think,
control people's minds.
what we're discussing now, that was before the whole Russian election story, no?
No. It's after. It's after because the Russian election.
Oh, this is after. Oh, okay. So this is not the early stage. Okay.
Yeah,
It's
this
not
is
that
in
early
2019. Anymore. Yeah, because like the Russian election nonsense came out in 2016. I want to say, right? 2015 was when it just first started going on. Then 2016, when Trump won the election, that's when it just started going out of proportion. I mean, you had the mainstream media, you had people like fucking Maddow, right? Rachel Maddow going on TV and saying that Russia is funding Donald Trump, and that's like facts. And ChatGPT agrees with this.
By the way, I see two censorship specialists and a behavioral scientist in the audience. I won't call you out, but I'd love you if you want to come on stage, or if not, just DM me any information that's worth sharing on stage, and I can keep your identity confidential, because I genuinely want to understand the other side of the argument and maybe something we're missing. I'm genuinely curious. So, and we're doing a censorship space on Tuesday or Wednesday to discuss it in more depth. So if you want to join that one, please do DM me. But yeah, go ahead, Ian. Let's continue with the thread.
Yep. So according to this email, again, this is on Twitter, right? The responses to the GEC. Russia linked Italy. It's the same as France, did a few spam mentions, and this one had more violations than the accounts they flagged comparatively to the first report. And then Russia linked China-Italy. More entertainment value than anything. If it equates anything pro-China, but also suggests that anything against China and Italy is part of Russia's strategies. These people are fucking insane. So, if someone in Italy promotes something that is pro-China, suddenly they're a Russian agent. Wild, right? Crazy shit.
Hey, one thing back to tweet number 20. This is something, with the lab leak theory basically now, is accepted, in the last week. But if you look in tweet 20, one of the second picture there is all COVID related, and they highlight all these accounts that they say are obviously, Russia based, and how many tweets that they've done on COVID, thousands. And, basically what the GEC is doing here is they're compiling all these reports, with their third-party groups and NGOs, and then just throwing these bulk, reports to Twitter and other social media platforms as well, and just hoping that Twitter will just take them at face and then just suspend these accounts. And the whole purpose, obviously, is to control the narrative and use Russia as the boogeyman.
Yep. That's exactly right. I mean, yeah, I skipped over this, but thank you for giving us a summary here. Yeah, according to the GEC, they say we analyzed 10 Twitter accounts featured in a French protest social media content analysis report published in December 26, 2019. And the table below lists the Twitter accounts included in our current analysis, which focus on messaging related to COVID-19 posted between 1 and 29 March 2020. So these are the same French accounts. Obviously, these accounts are, aside from Sputnik France, obviously most of these accounts are, I would say dissidents, right? Like they're people who are not part of the mainstream who, frankly speaking, were right about COVID, right? They were tweeting about how it was, created in a lab, things like that. And how this whole thing is a way, the pandemic is a way to start lockdowns and shutting people up, shutting people inside their houses and screwing people's jobs up, That's what these people were tweeting. And suddenly they managed to create this cohesive narrative about how anyone who's speaking out against COVID, who was also, supporting the Yellow Vest protests the year before, oh my God, they must be Russian, right? The Russian disinformation. Like, so you're anti-lockdown, suddenly you're Russian. And you see this quite a bit with, like, in Canada, for example. Like, I follow some of these stupid OSINT accounts, and they're like claiming that the Freedom Convoy protest, which happened last year, was in fact backed by Russia because they were, like, anti-lockdown. This is the insanity we're dealing with. Some of these people are genuinely crazy, the people putting out this narrative. But many of them, they just, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They're not stupid people.
Yeah, and the tweet I put out last
just for the
night,
record.
Go ahead, Mario.
Go ahead, name.
Okay, well, the tweet I put out last
first.
night was the official intelligence community assessment of the 2020 election, and just buried in there, I mean, it was all election related, interference by foreign actors. But buried in the report on page 9, there was one little subtext where they obviously accused Russia of amplifying, negative stories or publishing negative stories on Biden and boosting Trump. But one line in there is they again accused Russia of amplifying and publishing, conspiratorial narratives about COVID. And what are those conspiratorial narratives? The lab leak, which is now true, right?
Yep, that's right.
I want to just mention one thing for the record. I want to remind everyone, because I'm heavily researching Russia, Ukraine, China, because of all those spaces we're doing. In the US, we're criticizing a lot of aspects of US quote unquote democracy, but we're still in a democratic country. There is censorship, but nothing compared to China or Russia or North Korea or Belarus.
How do you know that's true? How do you know that's true, Mario?
But for example, Russia, what was the law they passed? 15 years in jail if you spread what's considered fake news, and some of what they consider fake news.
Nobody's in jail for 15 years, Mario. Nobody's in jail for 15 years. Like, I know people who protest in St. Petersburg. I actually know people there in St. Petersburg who did go to these protests.
Imagine they passed such a law in the US. People will be on the streets with guns. Like, even passing such a law is extreme. We would not.
But Mario,
there's a law.
The U.S. doesn't have to pass any laws. They just jail people indefinitely. Look at the January 6th protesters.
Look at
I'd almost argue what we do is a little bit more dangerous because it's so pernicious and it's insidious. So you almost cultivate this idea that that speaking out, like, everybody's already speaking free, so you're censoring in the background. And
guys,
so that's worse than 15 years in prison.
Yeah, look what's going on up in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, Canada people lost their bank accounts. Lost their bank accounts, lost their jobs, lost their job licenses.
This is cancer.
Ian, I'm actually speaking more. I don't know if that was Ian speaking. Sorry, I don't know everyone's voice yet, so I'm a little lost. But there's a bill that actually will prevent us from having opinions on the internet. It literally is that. And so, I don't know. I would urge you guys to have a look at that.
What's the bill? Hold on. What's the bill, Laura?
Oh, Bill C. I don't know. There's so many bills. Oh God, I think it's C11.
It's an anti-free speech bill. Yeah, in Canada, where basically if you speak out against the government or quote unquote put out disinformation, you could go to jail for it. Yeah.
Well, we're an interesting society because we already have hate laws, and what people don't understand about that is that hate laws in Canada are never enforced, number one, very rarely. So it's like, it's a law, it sits there, it looks good, yay. But it's rarely enforced, and when it is, it's only when, and it's very specific, when it's mass publishing of hate material, and they have very specific case law on what that means. So Holocaust denial, things like that. Some people would argue that that's a good thing. Some people would argue that's a bad thing. The point is that the government, the point I'm making in Canada, is going further than that, and they're doing it by, it's a long story, but basically Canada has laws about Canadian content having to be part of our ecosystem in order for people to get funding. So they're using these they're using funding as a way to stop people from having their own creative thoughts and processes and sharing that. Long story
Laura,
short,
I just searched a random article about Russia 15 years in prison, and obviously I need to look into this a bit further. But this is the following: Russia, prominent opposition activist faces
yeah,
up to 15 years in prison for sharing information about the war in Ukraine.
yeah,
And the
and I
person's
believe,
name is Marie. So the person shared actions of the Russian military in Ukraine, dubbed "quote unquote" fake news by the authorities. And that's a piece of an article by Amnesty International. And the person's name is Vladimir Karamurza, who was criticizing Russian authorities. And he's had 2 attempts of being poisoned. And so, I don't want to get this political. I'm just saying, like, I think the US needs a lot of work, but I don't think we should. I
Mario,
don't know.
January 6th, people were jailed, imprisoned for several years, 2 years now, without any trial. How is that fair?
But how's that? I'm not saying it's fair. I never said
mean,
it's fair.
that's
That's
not
not putting
illegal.
words in my mouth. But
It's
go ahead,
pernicious,
Ryan.
right? Mario,
I'm not.
just
But I'm not.
because
But I'm not being.
I'm just saying, just because there is no law written to, to say that something is, can get you in jail doesn't mean it's not going on. I mean, if you look at 9/11, right? After 9/11 happened, what happened to the Muslim community in America? They were targeted by the FBI. Many of them were put in jail for weeks, tortured even for months, right? They're imprisoned without due process. This happened under the Patriot Act. It enabled it, right? So you don't need a law that says, oh, you can't talk about X, Y, and Z. If the
right.
FBI decides that you're a bad guy, they can throw you in jail without any sort of like giving you access to a lawyer, and then you
Of
sit in there
course.
for years and years and years.
And
It's
laws
horrible.
can't prevent people from sharing, number one. And number two, laws are often used as a threat. It's not necessarily, we are going to do this. The chill factor comes in with when a law actually is on the books and exists. It's the threat that creates the sort of permeability and the ability for our governments to stop us from saying what we want to say. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
just a law. And in
There are
That
fact, I'd
lots of
argue
happens in
laws
it's
on the
not.
Russia
books
too,
that are
though. That
never acted
happens in
on.
Russia too, because look at Navalny. How long is he in jail? I mean, Russia is
Navalny
not.
is in jail for corruption. He's not in jail because he spoke out against the government. So they didn't jail him for that.
But we've seen opposition. Every person opposing Putin very public about it and gaining traction, getting
They seem to be
jailed or
fine.
poisoned.
They seem to be fine. Most of them are fine.
They get poisoned.
Piotr, you feel free. You're sitting there with your hand up, bro. You can jump
right,
in, man.
okay, let's have a couple questions here. Ian, where do you live?
Malaysia? Why?
Why do you live in Malaysia?
Because I was born here?
Okay, but have you got American citizenship? Have you got US citizenship, or do you have any association with the United
Nope.
States? Okay, what about
Nope.
Russia?
Been there though.
Yeah, okay. And
Nope.
did you ever feel, when you were living or working or being in the US for an extended period of time, if you were, that you could say something and you weren't fearful of something coming on your back?
Nope. Of course I felt that.
You
Of
felt
course I
it.
felt that. It's called cancel culture. Yeah.
Okay, so cancel culture is an online process which has been appearing more and more in certain ways of life, in certain places like universities. But at no point is cancel culture a systemic threat to the actual way that you can live as a person. As someone who
No,
actually
it is.
has lived in
It is.
Russia.
It means that you can't get a job anymore, and then you're
Ask
destroyed.
Scott
Your career is
Adams.
ruined.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Look at what's happening here right now.
So you would prefer, if I'm understanding you and other people on these spaces that I engage with,
I like the laws to be
increasingly,
clear,
Ian,
Piotr.
you would prefer to live in Russia than the United States?
Yeah.
You would.
Because the laws are clear. They tell you exactly what would happen if you do X, Y, and Z. I don't like living in a place that implies that something bad could happen to you, because that chills speech. There's a reason why, for instance, on Facebook or Twitter, you have no idea what can get you banned.
Okay, so back up there a little bit. So, you are happier, if I'm understanding you correctly, to live in a country where your freedom of speech is extremely constrained.
All we need to do, Piotr, there are things here where I live that I cannot talk about.
Yeah, okay,
and
but
it's
that's what I'm
fine.
saying.
You know what? It's like, hey, you know the law.
Mario, this isn't
But
your
Ian,
work, mate.
is
You're not
there?
going to allow me to speak. So,
Go ahead.
yeah. So,
He is. It's okay. Go ahead.
So, and this isn't a personal attack at you, man. I'm just trying to dissect what you're saying as an independent party who's just joined the room, right? So, from what I understand from some people, not necessarily only you would prefer to live in a country where the laws are very clear. So you have a restrained freedom of speech, but it's very clear what you can and can't say, instead of a country where you can say much more, but you're concerned by the prospect of potentially being put in jail and
It's a fucking minefield. Yeah,
right. So
absolutely.
Yeah,
I
I was
lived in
just about to
Singapore
say,
for years.
country where your overall
I
ability
did.
to
I lived
talk
in
certain things is
Singapore, which is
impossible.
one of the world's most autocratic countries in the world. There's so many things you can't talk about. You can't talk about race where it pertains to the Singaporean governorship. You cannot talk about that. That will throw you in jail.
Singapore's not a
Like Amos
democracy.
Yee, he was a pedophile, by the way. He was thrown in jail because he attacked the government, right? And you know what? Fuck that guy. He knew what he was doing.
Yeah, but Ian, Singapore's not and has never been a democracy. It's a family sort
I
of
know.
run business.
It's a wonderful fucking place. It's a
an
wonderful
amazing
place where the laws are
establishment,
enforced.
but it's also not
It's an awesome
but it's
place.
also not.
It's a
you
wonderful
can't
place.
replicate it at the scale of the US or other countries.
Nobody's saying what argument are you making, Piotr? That's besides the point. I'm saying it is an
I'm
autocratic country and
saying
it's
that
good.
you're benefiting from
I'd
something
rather
that
live
you're not
there.
preaching.
I'd rather live in a place that tells you X, Y, and Z. Don't do these things. It will land you in trouble. Just don't do these exact things, and you'll be fine, right? I'd rather live in a place where the laws make sense versus a place that says, "Oh, you got all this freedom," and then you're stepping into a minefield where anything you say could result in your demise. Like, to me, that is bullshit. It's fucking scary to not know what to be able to say or what you can't say, what will get you canceled. You tell a joke, oh my god, there goes your career.
Hold on, which social media? So in the US, you've got, let's talk about Twitter. Is Twitter allowed in Russia right now?
Yes.
Is Meta allowed in Russia?
Yes. The problem is Meta bans Russians, so it's kind of like a one-sided thing.
It's not allowed in Russia, and that's just incorrect.
No, it is allowed. You use a VPN because that's the only way to access Facebook.
No, but that's not allowed.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to. But Facebook banned it. Facebook banned Russia. Do you get it? Like it's so funny. You say that Russia banned XYZ. It's like, well, they banned it first, didn't they?
Elements of Russia.
Hold on, I've got another. So hold on. So
let me make it very clear, Ian. You're going from maximalist.
Facebook banned. Instagram banned Russians from using the platform. You know that,
Russians, right? Mate. They banned certain types of Russians with certain.
They banned the fucking IP blocks.
They're also a private
what do you think happens when you ban an entire ISP?
You like Twitter because you like Elon Musk doing what he wants with the platform. Well, unfortunately, I don't. And let me make this very clear. This is not what I
mean, obviously, Russia, blocked them back because Twitter, they failed to comply with the law. I'm actually DMing with a Russian right now, and he's telling me, right, that Russia blocked Twitter and Facebook because they didn't comply with the law. And the law is basically pertaining to Russia's rules on hate speech.
So in February 22, China, Iran, Myanmar, North Korea, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, who we all agree have a pretty horrible track record on free speech, and Russia have blocked access to Twitter.
Yeah, because of hate speech laws. Because the reason of Facebook in particular is they
but
started
allowing. Sorry, go ahead.
You're kicking.
No, hold on.
If I'm going to speak, you're not going to fucking interrupt me every single 5 seconds. Okay, like you don't like it when I do that.
Go ahead. I'll let you.
Let me speak first. I'm not losing my temper. I'm just saying, shut up for a while. The point is, okay. The point is, Facebook has enabled hate speech. They allowed glorification of Nazis on Facebook. You know this, right? This was lobbied by the Ukrainian government to allow the promotion and glorification of the Azov battalion and other elements of the neo-Nazis in Ukraine, because they claim that it's okay to actually glorify the deaths of Russians. It's okay to glorify Nazis because, oh my God, we're being invaded. And Facebook agreed with it. They agreed with the lobbyists, and they did that. And this is what caused them to violate the law, and that's why Russia banned them.
Before you go,
yeah, Piotr, Facebook has never banned. Just so you guys know, in my background, I can tell you that Facebook has a different reason for not banning certain things, and it has to do with actually being able to locate things. So they're different.
I just want to go to Ian, because we just talked about how things shouldn't be censored, and community notes are a solution. We saw, a certain level of censorship in the US, and we're all up in arms against it. We got Russia not censoring to a certain extent, but just blocking Twitter altogether. Would you say that this is? Would you agree with that decision, or do you think that this goes against what the argument we're trying to make?
I think it's completely besides the point. I mean, they don't fucking pretend to be a liberal democracy, do they? Singapore doesn't.
Your
So why are we
argument,
holding them to America
if we
standards?
do some psychoanalysis here, then Ian, and again, I like you, man. I think you've got some good insights, and I find
Like you too, Piotr.
and I think your memes are funny,
But
right?
carry on. Why don't you just get to your point? Why don't you just get to your point and skip the flattery?
If we look at what's happened here, you're quite on the defensive, and you're saying not to be interrupted, yet you've done it more times than anybody else on the stage, so let's have some consistency. To the actual point, I think that what's revealing to me is that it's not so much even you like or defend the Russian or Chinese or whoever it is states. It's more you're just really angry with the hypocrisy of the West. And those are two different things. I want to make it very clear for a lot of people listening that I don't agree with a lot of what the American state is doing. I don't agree with a lot of things that the British state is doing. 10 years ago, the British government had the most amount of security cameras of anybody in the world. Britain was the most surveillance country per person in the world. I think it's changed now. But the point is, Western countries do this. Everybody spies on everybody all the time. It's an inevitability of life. But the thing is that you know what you're getting if you live in an autocratic state, because you live there and you're like, right, okay, I'm in a place where my rights are a little bit more comparable. I'm not as easy to able to do things. I need to watch my P's and Q's and so on. In a democratic state, you'd like to think that you can do that. But if you live in somewhere, I don't know, New Zealand or some other places, and you speak ill of the government, you're not likely to be imprisoned unless you do something that is perhaps against this slightly woke agenda. Yeah, I get that. But it's still, I think, a bit of a stretch and disingenuous to compare the ability to say that I don't agree with, like what did Justin Trudeau do a few years ago? He said, he corrected a woman, ironically by mansplaining, by saying, oh no, it's not mankind, it's people kind. That's a suppression and suffocation of language, and that is wrong. But to compare that is the same equivalency as someone who is actually put in jail in Gulag simply because they're protesting the political system within that country is not really fair. Alexander Navalny is not my
freedom trucker protest.
Yeah, the freedom
Sorry,
trucker
Paul.
protests are a good example. But I will land with this point, which is that
Piotr, that's a bit
Navalny
disingenuous to claim that. It's a bit disingenuous to claim that the UK isn't doing stuff like that because people have gotten arrested.
Of getting poisoned. So I think we need to be a little bit fair with these comparisons. The trucker protests. Yeah,
well, let's talk about fairness about comparisons, okay? Because in the UK, people get jailed. Okay, a girl was fined and she was jailed because she said the N-word in a obituary post about her dead friend. They call it hate speech.
How long was she jailed for?
3 months. And then she got community service because she posted the N-word. Yeah, somebody reported her.
I think. Look, we're gonna find flaws in almost every country. In the US, I think it's far.
People are being arrested for praying silently outside of abortion centers. Like people are in the West, right? All these liberal democracies. People being arrested. In Canada, a teenage boy, was arrested because he protested. He was outside of his school where he was suspended for going against the. It's a Catholic school. He was opposed to them having trans bathrooms. Right? He was opposed to it.
That and Justin Trudeau's she-sperience, as it's called, always she in front. I'm sorry, it doesn't compare to Novichok. I'm going to have to take that point. It just doesn't. There's just no comparison.
Yeah, but the interests apply more to American citizens. Your tax dollars are being weaponized
before you jump in, bro. Prodigal. Just to say, Aaron has been waiting for a while, man. I know I brought you up, bro. So good to have you here.
We should also
Aaron,
mention how in Virginia, the FBI, their office decided to target every single Catholic who performed a Latin Mass. They were targeted as white supremacists, as extremists who needed to be suppressed. Do you know how fucking insane that is to go after Catholics for praying?
Aaron, I want to go to you, Aaron, and I've got a question. Aaron, I've got a question for you because you've heard a good debate. I jumped in a bit, but it was mainly Ian and Piotr about censorship in the US, which we've been very critical of. And in this case, we're really focusing on Russia, but I'd like to add China to the mix as well. Are you able to give us your thoughts on comparing both countries?
Yeah,
where do you stand?
Absolutely. And I'm going to attempt to kind of reconcile this debate by saying that the either or of, do we want to live in a regime where the laws are clear And one knows clearly whether what I'm about to do or what I'm about to say is going to run afoul of the law, or do I want to live in a regime that supposedly has more free speech, but where there are these kind of arbitrary punishments, legal, cultural, or otherwise, that I might run afoul of, and that has a chilling effect on my speech. And what I want to say is, at least in the United States, we shouldn't be facing that dichotomy. And the reason is the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. Let me explain what I mean by that. The Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, the Supreme Court has said very clearly in multiple precedent cases that amendment of the Constitution requires that every law be sufficiently clear that a person can know whether or not what I'm about to do would violate the law. And without that clarity in the definitions and in the laws themselves, our constitutional rights are being violated. And this is actually an issue that came up in a recent censorship case. So I'm a plaintiff in a case called Hogue v. Newsom here in California, challenging a California law called Assembly Bill 2098, which is medical misinformation, medical censorship law. We challenged this law where the medical board can basically punish physicians for saying anything that contradicts the quote-unquote current scientific consensus on COVID. And what we're arguing is, number one, this violates the First Amendment free speech rights of physicians. But number two, it also violates the equal protection rights under the 14th Amendment, because the definition of misinformation in the law is not sufficiently clear that a doctor can know whether or not what I'm about to tell a patient might run afoul of the law. And interestingly, the judge recently enjoined the law. He issued a temporary injunction, basically halting the law while the case is being tried. And he said, I'm not even going to opine on the free speech issue, because on the 14th Amendment issue alone, on the lack of clarity in the definition of misinformation in the law, on the face of it appears to be unconstitutional. So that's a long way of saying we shouldn't be facing this kind of dichotomy that Ian proposed. He proposed it because we seem to be facing that dichotomy. But if we're in a regime here in the United States where the law is insufficiently clear, or would you have these federal actors that are making up their own definitions of disinformation, misinformation, and surreptitiously punishing citizens, then our constitutional rights are being violated. And we don't actually have free speech, even if, we still have a First Amendment on paper. So, my answer to the argument is I'd rather live in a regime where we both have clarity of the law and the kind of robust First Amendment free speech protections that Americans are supposed to be guaranteed. And in fact, we should live in that regime because the Constitution, as it's been interpreted by the Supreme Court and the lower courts, guarantees both of those rights.
Yeah.
What I would say to that very quickly is, I've got a 30-second comment, Brian. I think that's a fair point. But I don't think we're comparing. I think we're picking certain bits of these elements and not keeping it consistent. Not you specifically, but what I mean is that we can have much clearer laws. We need to absolutely, I think, make it clearer where the boundaries are, where the jurisdictions are, but also still have that freedom of expression. Right? We seem to be thinking that you can either have it's a democracy and therefore it's all grey and it's not clear and there's this nefarious underpinning sort of encroachment on our values versus the autocratic countries. Right? If you do this, you're screwed. Right? Well, we can perhaps adopt some of that clarity that the autocratic states have if that's what we want to do, while still maintaining our freedoms, right? I think that's something. I don't think we have to go to the autocratic state to be clearer on our freedoms. Right? I think we can still have our democracies or whatever, but still have maybe those clearer boundaries set in place. And that's what but that's why it's hard, because democracies are much more of a complicated system to implement. Anyway,
I want quickly. Sorry, Malcolm jump in, and then Brian and Patrick, I want you to kind of jump in as well. Before we protocol brings the house down. Jump in, Malcolm.
Okay, yeah. Let me get in real quick before. That's funny. All right. So you would argue that, Peter, but the issue here is that, again, in a place that's labeled as a democracy, but also as an increasingly centralized government, The government's going to do everything in its path or in its power to basically remove things that obstruct its path to maintaining said power. So they'll create these laws and these rules that are arbitrary, malleable, and are kind of a moving target. It's kind of like, would you rather exist in a place that has a park that has a minefield, or a place in a park that has the bombs clearly labeled? Because if the bombs are clearly labeled, you can advocate for getting those removed. Whereas if you're in a minefield, well, best of luck to you, especially if you got to cross the park for any purpose. Like, we use things like the UK as an example. The UK recently, back in December, actually had somebody arrested. I think it was the director of the March for Life over that way, arrested on the charge of a public space protection order for praying within the proximity of an abortion center. Now, the UK is supposed to be a part of this Western this Western democratic system that we have, right? Yet they have a law that runs afoul of that. Yet if you are under the auspices that this place supports free speech, you're pretty much screwed, and you didn't even know it, and it screws you over, and it's hard to combat that because everybody else still believes that it's free speech, and you can't even advocate for, say, removing that landmine. So that's the inherent danger.
Yeah,
And
but
the problem with
Malcolm,
the US is,
I get what you're saying, mate, but if you think that the democratic states are, encroaching on the level that China is in terms of centralization and suppression of expression and so on, mate, come on. Respectfully,
they are doing that in Scotland. Guys. Yeah, can I just say,
Ian jump in and then Brian.
Go ahead, Ian. Right, Hamza Yusuf has pushed forward a proposal, and this is largely agreed upon by the ruling party, the SNP, to criminalize hate speech at the dinner table. This is his own words. Basically, if you are at the dinner table and you start talking about immigrants, you're violating the law. You could go to jail for that. If someone in your family decides that they don't like what you just said at the dinner table, like you're having Christmas dinner and you said something that was awful about immigrants, they can report you and get you arrested for hate speech. Like, this is what they're proposing.
We only have to beat the bar of communist China. I mean, that's all. As long as we're doing better than China, I mean.
Well, I mean, Brian, going back to the Twitter files.
Hold on, Laura, hold on, everyone, just please. Brian, because hasn't spoken yet, and then Patrick hasn't spoken yet as well, and Prodigal.
And then I'd like to get back to the Twitter files because,
definitely.
Yeah, but, so go Brian, and then go Patrick, and then Laura, and then I'll go back on.
So Aaron, I totally understand what you're saying about the 14th Amendment having to do with your own case. I think that was a really good point. What the judge said and all of that, but I do think it's different if you're going to try and link that to, say, a government agency supplying a list, which I absolutely don't agree with, to a private company in order for them to investigate it themselves and see if their terms of service are being breached. I think one of them is a clear example of a breach of an abridgment of the 14th Amendment. But the other, it's not. It's immoral, I'd argue, but it's just a government organization discussing with a private company something, not forcing, not saying you must remove these people because all of these people on this list are bad or bots or whatever you want to call them.
So they're just giving the list just because they're just shooting a breeze, right? Nice little conversation. They don't expect anything to come of it.
No, it doesn't work that way, Brian. This form of collaboration,
but it does.
When there's an asymmetry of power. No, I mean there's actually several free speech court case precedents that say even if it looks like it's a cooperative relationship, because of the asymmetry of power, it's the government involvement in censorship.
I would love to see one of these cases.
The government cannot be involved in censorship. I'll send you the references. There's several references in our complaint filed in the Missouri v. Biden case, which is directly relevant to these Twitter files. That's a case where we're alleging government collusion with social media companies. But we also know, even setting that issue aside, we also know that that's not how these relationships actually functioned. So we have a lot of evidence now, both uncovered in that Missouri v. Biden case and uncovered in the Twitter files, that there was harassment, bullying, intimidation.
So Aaron, I totally agree. If that's the case,
and said,
let me just say, if that's the case, then I agree with you. What I'm saying is we don't have evidence of that.
No, we do have evidence. The Biden-Harris administration just announced just now. Guys, hold on. They just announced a national cybersecurity strategy, and they talk about how they want to rebalance their responsibility to defend cyberspace by shifting the burden of cybersecurity away from individuals, small businesses, and local governments onto the organizations that are most capable and best positioned to reduce risk for all of us. Basically, they want to turn, companies like Facebook and Google into censorship apparatuses, right?
But
and part of this strategy,
like, Ian, can I just?
They even said here that they're working with allies and partners to make secure, reliable, and trustworthy global security chains for information and communications technology and operational technology products and services. I mean, guys, if it wasn't fucking obvious enough that they're trying to censor everybody, here's the evidence. They announced
it.
Guys, can you please guys. Hey, Laura, can everyone just stop for a second? Like, I would like everyone to have a chance to speak. Brian just jumped off. I'd love him to make his point.
Yeah, because he freaked out. Because he was wrong.
No, I think he was just getting frustrated because he was making a point.
You're being tyrannical, Ian. You're ruining the conversation.
Oh, yes, I'm ruining the conversation with facts. How dare I? I mean, better have feelings, like feelings before facts, guys. My gut feelings that Biden means well, never mind the shit that he puts out there. His own administration says, yeah, by the way, we're going to start turning, y'all into cybersecurity apparatuses. Sure.
Ian, but we just had the thing is, I agree with your point. Like, you're making good points, but like when Brian was frustrated because he was just interrupted, and then Piotr again was just muted, so they just both left. I think that's what bothered
I didn't mute him.
Whoever muted them, or maybe it was glitch. So I'll tell him it was glitch because I was muting a bit earlier. But I know we want to continue with the thread, so maybe maybe it's a good time to continue with the thread if you don't mind, Ian. And then we'll
let Patrick speak first.
Afterwards.
Let Patrick speak because he's had his hand up for 30 minutes now.
Yeah, sure. Jump in, Patrick.
Hey, just quickly, if Brian was looking for a case, go to Changizi versus Health and Human Services. This is a lawsuit by the New Civil Liberties Alliance. And CISA is a cyber infrastructure security agency that's nested under the Department of Homeland Security. And they have a specific policy in which they consider social media to be part of the critical election infrastructure. So it becomes a national security imperative, and they have what's called a whole of society approach to securing the nation's critical infrastructure. So this was used as the raison d'etre for the mass censorship, a lot of which Matt Taibbi has, and his colleagues, Barry Weiss and the others, a lot of things that they've uncovered come under that sort of remit. That's where a lot of that stuff's coming from. And again, the private company defense that you hear a lot of people rushing to Facebook or Twitter's defense over the last 3 years, we all heard it. They can censor who they want because they're a private company. As soon as the federal government is involved in any collusion to deny First Amendment rights of any American citizens, all of a sudden you lose that private company defense and you become a party to a violation of someone's constitutional rights. So this is what's happening in the courts on multiple cases right now. Aaron pointed this out more or less in what he just said, which is absolutely spot on. But the other thing I want to ask is, Ian and Mario, I've got a fun fact question for you. Guess how many people were arrested for social media posting in the United Kingdom in 2021? What do you think that number is?
I'm going to guess about 3,000.
How much?
I'm going to guess 3,000. Yeah.
Pretty close, Ian. 3,300. Now,
nice.
during the same period, how many were arrested for social media postings in Russia?
I'm going to guess somewhere around 100.
Sort of close, about 400.
Okay.
And you have Sorry, Protocol. Protocol. Go ahead.
He was making a joke.
No, I was cracking a joke.
Okay, Patrick.
Just disappear them or they end up jumping off of buildings. I remember a lot of Russians were
but
taking
here's
a lot of
here's the thing, people like to bring up the Novichok thing and the poisoning. There's no actual evidence suggesting that these people were poisoned by Russian agents. And why would they do so quite publicly? But the idea that they were poisoned by Russia, and I'm not saying this to defend Russia, I'm just saying, where is the evidence? They're claiming, oh, Russia did this and they're sloppy. Oh my God, they're so sloppy. Look at the stupid Russians. They're so sloppy, but also they're the greatest threat to mankind. It's like, which is it, guys? Are they sloppy or are they like the greatest spies ever? Like you can't do it both ways. And judging from what I've seen recently of what America's doing with the destruction of Nord Stream, it's like maybe the British government killed these people themselves to stage a false flag. I don't know. Just putting it out there.
Just quick question for Patrick. If you don't mind me asking, what's the source of these two numbers?
One of them is former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, John Anderson. He's got a show, and his guest was Konstantin Kisin, who's a popular online personality, and recently Oxford Debate Union, that sort of story. So he quoted these numbers. I didn't get the provenance of those stats, but there are a couple of NGOs that keep records. The other interesting one is Belarus. In 2022, 2,500 arrests for social media comments. That's from Our House. It's an NGO that monitors things in Belarus and other countries. And that's probably because during the period of when there's this conflict that has officially began in February 2022, the government clearly more kind of heavy-handed.
But do you I have a question, Patrick? When you see have you ever seen Putin do a speech on TV and then the reporters challenge him right after his speech and ask him questions and debate him
yes,
live
they have long
on
conversations with him, Mario. They have massively long conversations with Putin. That's the thing about Putin's speeches. He doesn't just talk there. He will go and talk nonstop with journalists, like endlessly. He doesn't just run away.
Well, Mario,
but journalists like attacking him and criticizing him live on air.
Mario,
because every time I see a press report by Putin, it's generally very well behaved. Reporters ask him like no one's really attacking him like they attack Biden, like they attack Trump, like that Obama or Bush. Where in the US it's very open mic and you've got people that are very critical of the presidents live on air in front of the rest of the nation.
Well, I think Patrick wants to respond to you.
But hold on, question and answer.
Mario. Mario, during the Biden administration, I've seen it's rare that he ever takes questions. I don't think he's given more than, correct me if I'm wrong, more than two open press conferences really during his first 2 years. Obama was the same. Totally, they handpicked the press corps at the White House. It's a small room anyway.
Biden's much worse. I mean, every weekend he's in Delaware and he won't disclose the visitor's log. I mean, we have no idea.
But hold up, Portugal. What does that have to do with the point of journalists debating a president live on camera?
He doesn't answer a single question.
Mario.
No, but at least you start hearing the questions that should be asked. You start hearing the tough questions.
Nobody asks them tough questions, Mario.
What do you mean? Trump was being. Trump was.
Yes.
What about?
Yeah, because they fucking hate Trump.
Yes.
Okay, let's look at Trump, for example. Trump, but there were journalists had the right to question him on camera.
Mario, you have a good point. Mario has a great point because when Trump came in as president, he moved the press conferences from that closet where the normal White House press sessions were done. He moved it to the bigger room, wing of the White House, and he invited a pretty much a much broader array of media, including independent bloggers and things like that, plus the mainstream. And Trump would hold court for, well over an hour, 2 hours sometimes, getting grilled, hitting back. It was great. It was great to watch. So from the Trump administration, probably the most open in terms of media access. But then the previous Democrat administration and the subsequent under Biden. But Putin does something that no one else does. He holds court. When he takes questions, he'll sit there for 3 to 4 hours, and with 1,000 journalists there, and he'll sit there and he'll give nuanced analysis on everything from economic policy to foreign policy.
Right?
What I'm saying is that it's a very different relationship in the U.S. or in Europe with the press from country to country. But Putin will go into detail about policy, will take challenges, intellectual challenges, things like that even U.S. presidents won't do because they'll just defer to their heads of departments or cabinet members. So in terms of the unitary executive, Russia's got a very different sort of style of public relations on.
I've got another question for you, Patrick. I've got another question for you. Have you seen on Russian national, and I don't want to continue with the thread, so I don't want to continue this too long, but have you seen on Russian TV Have you seen the same? It's very rare to see any criticism
No,
of
that's wrong.
Putin.
Mario, that's wrong. That's
Actually,
incorrect.
Ian, let me just weigh in real quick, and I
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
hear
you
what
go
you
ahead.
have to say.
Yeah, you go ahead.
But
Yeah.
listen, what's crazy about Russian television is, especially over the last, say, 5 to 6 years, there's so much opposition media in Russia. And a guy like Bill Browder will get top billing on a lot of the top channels in Russia. They're bashing Putin 24/7. If you ask people who live in Russia or Moscow, they will verify this. Okay. And so there's a lot of criticism against Putin, especially in the previous years. Now they're at war, Mario and Ian, everybody. Now they're at war. It's a different landscape right now because it's now everything's under a national security mantle. So things are
It's
arguably
very so.
tighter.
Another question, Patrick. Would you say it's as easy to find? So we do these spaces. We've criticized NATO's involvement in the war. There's multiple YouTube videos criticizing NATO's involvement or NATO causing the war. And I'm not saying I support that argument. I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just making a point. We've seen people on TV start to question it. The media is generally pro-Ukraine, for sure. But I'm saying there is, even on CNN, there's people that come in and talk about NATO's expansion, make that argument. So that argument is very common to find in the West. Let's focus on the US. In Russia, Patrick, would you say, and this is it's not going to be hard to kind of prove or disprove. Would you say you could
Can I
find
answer this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to
So
say
Ian
that
and then
the
Patrick.
atmosphere is different because right now a lot of Russians feel that there's this existential threat to Russian culture, to Russian civilization. The world is Russophobic. They talk about killing all Russians, about tearing it apart. So there is this sense of this unity among Russians that even among liberal Russians who typically criticize Putin, that they are under threat. They're under siege right now. And, they face a massive opponent, not just in the form of the United States or Ukraine, but in the form of NATO as a whole. Europe doesn't want them, right? They feel this sense of alienation, and it's a terrible feeling, to feel like that. So they're rallying behind Putin. There's a reason why his approval ratings are, through the roof right now. And this is not because Russians are afraid to speak out against him. If anything, his biggest critics right now in Russia are people who are saying he's not going hard enough, that he's not mobilizing fully.
Not only that, there's a whole contingent, a demographic. We call them the Russian liberal intelligentsia in the metropolitan areas. I know quite a few of them from previous years doing media and interfacing with RT from time to time. And some of them went to high school in America, or they did university exchanges in America or Europe. Very pro-Western. They've always been pro-Western. And then things changed after 2016, when the West started getting the rhetoric became a little more vociferous and hateful, and things have changed. And if you talk to people in Russia, they'll tell you the same thing: is that pro-Western contingent among the intelligentsia, that it became smaller and smaller, and people felt that they weren't welcome anymore in the West. They're being discriminated against, or they travel to the West, being looked at funny, or a different attitude. So the relationship's different now because of I think largely because the politics have changed in the West. Russians are the same and generally have a lot of fealty, especially the middle class, towards the West. So we've really alienated them by going overboard with Russiagate and everything.
A lot of the
problem right now. Can you hear me?
Sorry, I was muted. I was just saying, the points that you both made, I think are valid. I'll go to Ravi for any final thoughts before Ian continues with the thread. But before going to Ravi, I've got one more question for you, Patrick, because I know you just jumped in. Would you say, and if you could answer it directly, it'd be great. And I don't want you to criticize Russia or the US, just an objective comparison. Would you say Russia has stricter censorship than the US, whether to independent media? I know there's the law they passed. You kind of made a point about less people arrested in Russia versus the UK, but it'd be good to see sources about this, because that'd be really surprising. And if it's true, that's a whole discussion within itself.
That's true.
But
the
the
hate
law,
speech arrests.
the law about 15 years jail time for anyone that spreads quote unquote fake news, or the points that I made, the fact that Meta and Twitter are both banned in Russia. So these, and Ian's kind of countered those points already. We had that debate, but I want to get your thoughts on this particular question. Without criticizing Putin, without criticizing Russia, just the point on, does Russia have stricter censorship than the US? Maybe you believe they should. I'm not saying they shouldn't. All other thing, do you think they have stricter censorship than the US? We all agree China does, but do you think Russia does?
Well, you're talking to somebody who was deplatformed from Facebook for 18 months and ended up in the Twitter files, plus has been deplatformed on Twitter, Facebook, other platforms. So I've personally experienced this. And also more in the UK, they banned the URL of RT.com and shut down RT's foreign bureaus. So,
true.
But
would you say these
are PayPal? I was banned from PayPal, Mario.
But I would say the United States
and Andrew Tate as well. So it's a good example. But go ahead, Patrick.
The US is the most open in terms of, like, you can access RT.com, although they threatened to censor the production company in DC, so they shut down RT, sanctioned them, so they shut down RT America. But America's generally better. We have constitutional protections in America. Britain doesn't have that. Britain has D notices. They have Ofcom. It's very heavy-handed, and they shut down your whole URLs banned at ISP level, so you can't even see Russian media outlets without a VPN. Okay, so as far as Russia goes, they tend to be reciprocal. I think they were more open before. They're shutting down now, and a lot of this is tit for tat. So they're doing this in response to Western censorship. It's probably very heavy-handed right now with the conflict that they're engaged in. Plus, there's, as Ian said, there's more of a national peer pressure.
But Patrick, if you look at right now, just look at right now, Twitter does not even have censorship, and it's still allowed.
That's because Elon Musk took over.
Elon Musk took over.
That's a difference.
Elon Musk took. Yeah,
that's why Elon Musk took over.
Okay, so Elon Musk,
Elon the Merciful, all hail Elon the Merciful.
Guys, just to back to the point. So Twitter exists today, uncensored to an extent, of course, in the
Twitter
US.
Works in a weird space. And Twitter is in a weird space right now because people are trying to censor him. He's under tremendous pressure from the European Union to censor people.
Yes, and you have other websites that are allowed. Is Reddit allowed in Russia?
I don't know, but
I'm not sure.
some websites might have been blocked. So yeah, there is censorship in Russia. Probably on paper is probably more. I'm just guessing, but it's probably more than the United States. Definitely on paper.
In August 2015, the whole of Reddit was blocked in Russia because of a post made by a Reddit user on the site. The post is a guide for growing psilocybin mushroom. So
yeah, it was temporary. It was a temporary block.
Yeah. Okay, you're right. Sorry. I take it back. Yeah. The block was lifted the next day after Reddit complained. That's a fair point. So I can't use that as an example.
But nuance the conversation,
and it's not,
Mario, because
it's not. By the way, just to answer the question, it's not banned in Russia because it's not on the government's radar, precisely because very few people use it. That's what.
But you got online social media censorship, then you've got mainstream media censorship, you've got state kind of.
I'm not so there's
different types of censorship, I think.
True. I'm not saying there's no, and we've been one of the most vocal spaces on censorship. This whole space is on censorship in the US, and we've covered the Twitter files more than anyone. But So just to go to Justin Hart's quick thoughts on this, and then I'll get Ravi's thoughts, and then of course, Ian, I want to continue with the thread quickly, rapid fire. But Justin, I want to ask you the question because we had a pretty heated debate where Brian jumped off for the first time ever, and Piotr for the 20th time. But Justin, question for you: do you think Russia has worse censorship than the US and the UK and the West? Or that's
no, definitely they have worse censorship in many ways. I know several people over there. As you know, I speak Russian and Polish and a couple Slavic languages. My Ukrainian's rough, my Serbian's okay. But talking to my colleagues over there, there's a general sort of avoid the other shoe from dropping feeling over there in Russia, which is to say people kind of go about their merry way. They don't have kind of the history of that First Amendment sort of stuff. But obviously, it's a bit freer than it was in the Iron Curtain. But the threats are just different. I would say that's probably the way that it's pronounced there, is that there's an entrepreneurial minded spirit. You kind of have to. There's a lot of opportunities over there that have been there, but it is a free for all. And then there's always just that threat of Big Brother coming after you. It's not as obsequious and in your face as it was when the wall was there. I visited in '89. I was in Poland in 1990, right after the wall had come down and everything else there. And so it's just it's hard to articulate. I definitely think that
this is not quite as opaque as it is in the U.S. and the West, right? I mean, in the West, I mean, you never know what you're doing might cause you to get in trouble.
That's true, but there have been numerous occasions where people are just straight up rounded up, thrown into the back of a car, and everything else there. When that happens here, there at least is some recourse that you have. And it becomes a national story. Well, but I would say we have our threats over here. Yeah, I think that's actually probably onto it. It is more.
They don't disappear though. I mean, let's just be clear about that, right? When people in St. Petersburg were being rounded up for protesting against the invasion, they were not even jailed. They were put in lockup for about 2 hours. I actually know a couple of people who got rounded up and they were like, yeah, you just pay 300 rubles and you're out. Like this is a misdemeanor. It's not a big deal.
I think that's accurate. Maybe one way to put it is
disappear people.
Well, let me finish this point. I think one threat that you have is that there is the threat here in the United States that this censorship can be codified. Like it can be actually put into law, right? And that's kind of what we saw over the last 3 years. When the chance and threat of mortality is on the line, people do crazy crap. I mean, I'm actually in D.C. right now, but where I'm from in California, there's a law that unless you toe the generalized line as a physician, you can lose your license. If you dare even submit ivermectin as a possibility for treatment on anything, you're going to get questioned. If you dare write a note to a family that their kids shouldn't be forced to wear masks, you can absolutely lose your license. Those are things that are actually codified into law. So I think that's the real threat that we have here in the United States, is they're using the excuse of all these various boogeyman that they can bring up. And you can bet those same tactics of lockdowns and even masks, to contain the stuff you exhale, those will be used for whatever sort of boogeyman they want to bring up, probably climate change.
Ravi, I'd love your quick thoughts on this, and then quickly Sleiman before Ian continues with the thread. Ravi?
Thank you, Mario, Ian. Really, really appreciate it. I think, I've been, following your space for such a long time. The point about, anti-Hindu, anti-right in India, we've been saying that for so many years. And of course, the insane Twitter regime, with Jack Dorsey, the insane man, the fact that today Matt is able to pull out that data, I know it's directly and not maybe indirectly related to BJP and Hindu groups in India. It's such an important fact. In fact, I just sent a DM to the IT minister saying that this must be taken up in a very, very serious way, because they've been muting, they've been shadow banning, they've been suspending accounts in thousands. That insane, although Vijaya was Indian descent, but she was never an Indian. She was completely an insane person, and you can put me on record for here. The fact that now we have something to fight with, and but one thing which I've been struggling with, and maybe one of you can really help, is that I love what you guys have done. I love what Elon is doing with Twitter, but I really feel that India as a second market for Twitter, I think there's very little attention being given there, especially that there are thousands of accounts even today that are shadow banned, and they're eager to be part of it, because one thing which makes India different from a US market or a Europe market is that we were the first one to ban TikTok and really call the CCP out, right? And say that, we cannot have TikTok working. So that's really it, so I'm really grateful. I hope we can do some more, things out of this Twitter file. So any other information on Hindu groups being banned, the right groups being banned in India will be really, really appreciated. Thank you so much for all the work you do.
I think you might want to reach out to Mehta. He might have more information about the involvement of Twitter suppression of Hindu nationalists.
Absolutely, I will. Thank you so much. If you can create any, connection, would really be appreciated. We will really take this up because, India's right now working on a social media rule amendment. and that was done really because of Twitter India, which was insane organization. And I think one of the best things Elon did was get rid of about 90% of those crazy employees. And I'm saying that as an Indian sitting in New York, though. And I know so many people celebrated, the fact that 90% of Twitter India was asked to leave because they were working completely anti-Hindu, anti the regime, completely insane.
And Rob, as an India file myself, having done business there in past years, I'm fond of telling people it's the largest.
Jim, you got a lot of wind on your mic, man.
Turn that up. I'm fond of saying, put your window up. I'm fond of saying that there is, it's the largest English-speaking country in the world. I mean, this is a tremendous connection and an opportunity to bring strength in the region to oppose China, and India is the way to do that. And we gotta really dig into that. So I'm glad you're looking into it, because it does need to change. We need India to be open up to this social media that's good.
I'll go, Ian. I want to continue with the thread, Ian, if you don't mind, because I know we went way off topic. So
for like 1 hour, and I'm sure Name would like to weigh in on the actual files here, so I'll continue. 21, right? So GEC's report on China was more entertainment value than anything, said Roderick. Roderick is a Twitter guy. That it equates anything pro-China, but also anything against China in Italy as part of Russia's strategy. That's insanity, right? This is what was in the report. Twitter staffers said professionalism. They tended to look at least once before declaring a thing for disinformation. They made them a tough crowd for the GEC. Fortunately, there's an easier mark. Right, the GEC's game is to create an alarmist report. This is quite similar to what the State Department
One second, did. Ian. 1 second. Back to 21 again.
Ahead.
So, like Matt
writes
about what's that?
No, I said no. You go ahead and explain it. Yeah,
in these screenshots. So the headline there is GEC reports China was more entertainment value than anything, whatever. But if you look at again, these reports that are being sent to Twitter. Inside that, in that screenshot, they're analyzing all the COVID-19 tweets as, Russia amplifying, conspiratorial narratives on COVID. And they're saying the percentage of them mentioned, in Italy and in the US and in China. So a lot of this, even though he's not writing about it in the text of the tweet, a lot of it they are blaming Russia as amplifying COVID conspiracies.
Big dragnet.
Yeah, that's right. I'll continue down, and afterwards I'd like to go to Patrick. I'll read a couple first.
Let's get at least up to number 30 or 40, even 40. I'd like.
Right, yeah. So the GC's game was first to create an alarmist report, send it to the slower animals in journalism.
Did Ian drop out? Was it me?
No, he cut out.
Yeah, somebody tried to call me.
I gotta take care of something.
Yeah. All good, Ian. All right, Prodigal, good. Welcome. You join us back anytime, man. Ian, you're back,
man. I'm just gonna put on my my focus mode so I can't fucking call in the middle of the damn thing. Nothing annoys me more, Nothing annoys me more.
Yeah, let me do that on mine.
Yeah, for real. It's like, I'll just randomly call you now. Okay. All right. So create an alarmist report, send it to the slower animals in journalism's herd, basically morons, and wait as reporters bang on Twitter's door, demanding to know why or this or that ecosystem is not obliterated. And Twitter emails ooze frustration at such queries. Ugh, reads one. And, one of the emails is Associated Press, a fact-check and misinformation reporter named Amanda Seitz. She was asking Twitter if they've taken down any of the reports yet. Another one from CNN. Guy named Ian Plunkett. From Ian Plunkett is a Twitter guy, not CNN guy, but he said, "Hi folks, checking in to see if we have any information from State. We've CNN onto us this evening with renewed focus over the weekend, expecting a round of media over this." Okay. Another guy, Tony Rom. I'm not really sure who he works for, but he's like, "Hey y'all, hope you're well. Sorry to bug, especially on the weekend, but you got a few minutes to chat. In short, I have this GEC report, or at least a version of it. I'd like to get your thoughts." Another one, Washington Post, was sent, not exactly sure from whom, but, all these Twitter people, they're pretty pissed off about it. They're like, this crap again, right? So, yeah. the journalists are clowns. They're basically, the GEC puts out some nonsense and then they bite. And then they ask Twitter, hey, why haven't you banned all these, there's 2 million Russian accounts. So Twitter disagreed with the GEC's alert about Russian disinformation in South America, which appeared to confuse cause and effect. As Roderick's put it, I believe what they mean is there was a surge in accounts that agreed with Moscow aligned narratives, Moscow controlled, right? So essentially anyone in South America tweets something that, I don't know, that Moscow might agree with. I guess they're Russian bots, have to be. And so this is from Aaron to Kevin. And then, it goes over how there's no criteria for what they consider Russia-aligned beyond accounts that, amplify RT or Sputnik. And yes, we have seen waves of accounts from Ecuador and Venezuela retweeting these two media accounts and have conducted cleanups on major protests. Not cleanups. So I can't read this exactly. This fucking email is a bit trashy. Basically, they've been covering the stories about what's happening in Venezuela and so on. And so Twitter says, I believe what they mean is there was a surge of accounts that agreed with Moscow-aligned narratives. Therefore, they've been painted as Moscow-controlled. I used to train the State Department in making these analyses, and at the best of times, they were on a rudimentary side, considering heavy turnover and upheaval across the department and the administration, as well as the current crisis they are facing. The research methodology is possibly more ideologically aligned than evidence-based. This is what Twitter said. Like, this is a person who worked at the State Department, and he has trained these analysts, and he said that he believes that all their takes, right, their so-called analysis, was not based on the facts, it's based on ideology. And so his recommendation is, I recommended pushing back against the allegations that they're making without hard data, peer-reviewed research, or even data released to the public, etc. Anyone can make unsubstantiated allegations. If they release their alleged Russians, they will likely get laughed out of the room by real researchers. Both accounts mentioned in the article are inactive and haven't tweeted in years, but are stated as having deleted their accounts according to the author. So without any data to back up their claims, I'd be very skeptical towards their supposed analysis. Cheers, Aaron. Right? So yeah, this is Aaron Roderick saying that. Number 26. Roth noted that Brett Schaefer of the Alliance of Security and Democracy, that's the ASD again, was quoted in Frankel's story and says, seems like ASD are back at their old tricks. So Yolarov was quite angry about all these people, these think tanks. He said, strong +1 to everything Aaron said, right? Aaron Roderick. It's certainly true that Russia operates and influence operations in Latin America, principally the Spanish language RT, which is the highest engagement RT account globally. But without more evidence to back up the more dramatic claims, I don't think there's much we want to do here, right? That said, flagging this for Nick, it seems like the ASD are back to their old tricks, despite the merits of the new Hamilton. And this is a screenshot of, this article. Brett Schaefer, who works at the ASD, an initiative of the German Marshall Fund of the United States, said some Twitter accounts spreading this information in Venezuela could be traced back to the IRA, the Internet Research Agency, which is run by, Russia or whatever. But there's no evidence of this. This is bullshit, right? This is what he basically says. Roth was referring to the fact that ASD created Hamilton 68, which in the previous Twitter Files drop, we discovered it was a so-called dashboard, but all they did was create, guilt by association. I believe Patrick was on that list, if I'm not mistaken. He was on the Hamilton 68 list, if you want to speak up, Patrick.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, and I know the person who put me on the list too is the guy who runs Hamilton 68. Clint Watts. So I criticized him during the 2016 election in a couple of articles at 21st Century Wire about this allegations of Russian hacking the DNC, and that a couple of those articles went viral, and I ended up probably on quite a few lists after that. But so maybe he had
it's a badge, grind. Patrick. It's a badge of honor now. So you should thank them.
100%.
Right. Yeah. So, but what's interesting about this Twitter dump with Matt Taibbi as well is he gets into the DFR Labs, and that's a subsidiary of the Atlantic Council and their Global Engagement Center. And, they've been profiling users online for years. They did, I was doxxed and then put in a list of Russian something or other in 2018, and they did a whole feature. They dedicated a whole feature to me because I had made a statement on a RT news broadcast as a volunteer analyst. And I said, John McCain has aligned himself with neo-Nazi factions in Ukraine. And this was around the time when John McCain, U.S. Senator, died. And so they said that I was pushing a Russian influence campaign by somehow, sullying the name of John McCain. And look, I'm from Arizona, and I'm telling you, there was no more divisive politician in America than John McCain, especially with Republicans and the anti-war left. So, to make a deal out of that, that's what the Atlantic Council was doing. And McCain was on stage with Oleg Tanybook in Privy Sector in December of 2013. So, but the whole idea was to attack journalists, bloggers, anybody that would go against whatever the sort of foreign policy line was. And that's what they're profiling. That what they call disinformation is dissenting opinion. They're just calling it disinformation. And so they get funding on that basis from all these different agencies to run all these different projects.
Ian, I'd love to continue the thread. I know Slayman has his hand up. So, Ian, maybe go through a few more tweets, maybe even wrap it up, and then we'll get Slayman's thoughts.
Okay, sure.
And we gotta also kind of
mine's.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry, yeah, I agree. I'm putting my hand down because let Ian finish, because mine was a point what you asked about earlier.
Man.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, people messaging me. Rolf is referring to the fact that the ASD created Hamilton 68, guilt by association scheme, detailed in Twitter Files 15. The dashboard was claimed to track accounts linked to Russian influence activities, but the list is largely made up of Americans. That's a screenshot of it. Now, the Hamilton 68 dashboard creator, J.M. Berger, was on the GEC payroll until June 2017, just before the dashboard's launch. Hamilton claimed the list was the fruit of more than 3 years of observation. Berger unequivocally denies working on Hamilton for the GEC. So Matt actually reached out to him, and Berger replied. He said that I checked my records to verify my recollections, and I need to correct the timeline. I worked for the GEC as a contractor through June 2017, not January. I emphasize again that I unequivocally deny that my work on the Hamilton dashboard was directed by the GEC, nor was it coordinated with the GEC in any way. At no point in this project did the GEC have any input or involvement whatsoever. So that's his claim. Hamilton 68 dashboard, this is Matt continuing in number 30, employed digital alchemy to create streams of headlines tying Americans to foreign disinformation. The ecosystem reports GEC and many disinformation laboratories feed reporters are often just subtler versions of the same thing, right? And this is a bunch of headlines that we saw on, previously. A lot of it is like, why the Kremlin is still active on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, or Twitter suspends China-backed accounts that spread propaganda, or China spends billions on Russian disinformation, U.S. envoy says. Just all these nonsense headlines. In a crucial in-house Q&A in mid-2017, Yoel Roth was asked if it was possible to detect Russian fingerprints using Twitter's public data. Though you can make inferences, he said, in short, no, it's not possible, right? So this is his response. He said, although you can make inferences based on public data about whether you believe an account is Russian, Google's access from the fire hose is broader than most, including any academics, but it's not deeper in terms of the actual data they have available. The most likely way they could have identified something on Twitter that pointed to something on their end was using link data from tweets and then seeing if those are promoted through DoubleClick or affected Google News or something like that. So it's basically really, 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 really hard, if not impossible, to determine if an account is Russian. So if Twitter and Google can't even figure it out, what makes these idiots think they can, right? That's the point he's trying to make. Twitter therefore knew that from the first days of the foreign interference mania that the media zone was flooded with bad actors playing up cyber threats for political or financial reasons, including the GEC. Quote, the GEC has doubled their budget by aggressively overstating threats through unverified accusations that cannot be replicated either by external academics or by Twitter, wrote Aaron Roderick's. This is where, it goes back to like one of the first things I said when on the space was that it's feature creep, right? They broadened their scope and they got funding for it, right? And here's what he said. Here's what Roderick said. The GEC has doubled their budget by aggressively overstating threats through unverified accusations that cannot be replicated either by external academics or even by Twitter. So they aren't operating with the greatest of credibility when they make announcements about accounts or widespread disinformation. Considering their track record of providing $1.5 million to a group that attacked any journalists opposed to war in Iran as pawns of their regime. So that's insane, right? And it links to a Talking Points memo article that points to the accuracy when their counter-Iran campaign deliberately targeted U.S. journalists that agreed with the policy of the U.S. government. So anyone who disagrees with the U.S. government suddenly is a bad guy, right? That's insane. Now, the same is true of New Knowledge, which is another company, the scandal-plagued company staffed by former NSA officials that the State Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, or the SSCI, hired to do expert assessments of the initial batches of suspect Facebook Twitter accounts. When Twitter saw New Knowledge and its reporter-worshipped disinformation gurus like Jonathan Morgan and Rene DeResta were making analytical leaps, they felt impossible. They knew something was off. God, I misread that so much. After Politico cited a New Knowledge report to the SSCI as evidence for what it called a sweeping effort to sow divisions, Twitter Dargan and K, went New Knowledge, pointed to 5 supposedly Russian accounts that they said were relatively easy to find with the Twitter public API. Now, this is a Politico article saying that, quote, reports show Russia mounted sweeping effort to sow divisions, support Trump. Okay. So here's what Yoel Roth replied in his email privately to all the other Twitter guys. He said, bots on the same botnets appear to be still active and are relatively easy to find with the Twitter API. These accounts, for example, have similar patterns to bots that are in the provided data, and there's a bunch of accounts there. And he says, although the bots are not doing anything malicious now, they're available to be repurposed for future malicious use, right? This was what the, not what Yoel Roth wrote, sorry, this is what Politico said. Roth replied, he said, 2 of the 5 accounts were small Indonesian content farm, just commercial spam. He will suspend them, but doesn't throw fire on, doesn't want to throw. He would have suspended them, but he didn't want to throw fire on the NK report by making everybody think that they were correct. And then the Becca account, which is one of the 5, is an American account and not at all suspicious. And that's what he said. So they misidentified a random American account as being, disinformation, Russian disinformation, even though it's probably just a Trump supporter. Twitter's Nick Pickle says in number 38, says, New Knowledge's pick accounts that they deem to be IRA controlled. IRA is an internet research agency controlled by Russia. And then spin up a bigger macro analysis, stories about 2,000 Russian accounts tweeting about Kavanaugh or the walkaway movement, which, Brendan, he has been in here, right? Like, the walkaway, the guy who founded it, he has been in here. Basically, they claimed he was a Russian agent because of this. Often based on media activity from NK. And NK is misidentifying people, and this is what Nick Pickles wrote. It says, for everyone's wider awareness, this goes to the heart of New Knowledge's pitch. They pick accounts that they've deemed to be IRA control, spin up bigger macro analysis, and then we saw about 2,000, stories about 2,000 Russian accounts tweeting about all these things. It was based on media activity from NK. God, I read the same thing. So just like Hamilton 68, the GEC and New Knowledge littered the media landscape with flawed or flat-out wrong news stories, exacerbating matters. Americans in both cases paid taxes to become the subject of these manipulative operations, right? So essentially, for instance, here's a CNN account saying Russian bots are using #walkaway to wound the Democrats in the midterms. This is nonsense. This has never happened. Right? The Russians are not involved in that. Another one from Fast Company says support for Brett Kavanaugh seems especially high among Russian propagandists. Again, based on flawed analysis. There are no Russian accounts supporting these things. And yet, this is claimed in the media based on flawed analysis that Russia was behind the backing of Brett Kavanaugh, right? Who was selected by Trump to, become a member of the Supreme Court. So, Matt Taibbi continues in number 40. Particularly egregious, right? A New Knowledge report to the Senate on Russian interference was leaked just days before it was outed in a scheme to fake Russian influence in an Alabama election, and no media outlets issued retractions. No SSCI staff commented either, right? So, here's some of the headlines. One of them reads, New report on Russian disinformation, prepared for the Senate, shows Operation Scale and Sweep. Another one reads, Senate reports find millions of social media posts by Russians aimed at helping the Trump and in the GOP, right? Another one from Axios says, Senate Commission report shows scale of Russian misinformation campaign. I remember these articles. Now, according to Matt Taibbi, foreign cyber threats do exist, and there are sophisticated ways of detecting them. But the GEC and its subcontractors do not use those, instead deploying junk science that often lumps true bad actors in with the organic opinion. So, for instance, you support X, Y, or Z, you support Trump, somehow you're a disinformation activist, right? According to them, you're a Russian. So, 42. Disinformation studies has mostly become a con. right? Where non-experts mesmerize reporters with one former GEC staffer calls hairball charts with measuring something idiotic like who follows two Chinese diplomats or shares an opinion like Free Palestine, right? And, one of the examples here, I forget exactly which this is from, it shows, it's just a bunch of stupid charts, that don't mean anything, like, or a meme that says Palestine will be free. If you share that, suddenly you're part of a thing. So, for instance, here's an email that he highlights from a senior technical advisor at the GEC, a guy named Semerudin Stewart, who writes to Stacia, who I believe is at Twitter. He says, in our ongoing effort to share information, please find the attached data file with a GEC-identified Twitter account. We're providing 5,500 of these accounts that display inorganic behavior or follow two or more of the 36 Chinese diplomatic Twitter accounts that we have identified in the report. Due to the fact that these accounts follow two or more of these diplomatic accounts, and a good portion of them are newly created, we believe that they are suspicious. We are shared for your situational awareness, and no action is requested. But for a call, please stand by for any communications, and we'll to pass related blah 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 blah. They basically said, "Hey, call us for more information." But essentially, if you follow more than two Chinese accounts, certainly you're suspicious, right? 43. The Washington Examiner and who is this? Gabe Kaminsky just profiled a GEC-funded NGO in the United Kingdom that algorithmically scores media outlets by risk. How does downranking the Daily Wire to help the New York Times get more ad revenue even counter foreign disinformation? So this whole thing is a grift, right? They downranked the Daily Wire, that's owned by Jeremy Boring, Ben Shapiro is part of it. They downranked it, claiming that it's part of disinformation, right? So, and this report is probably something you want to read. It's in the Washington Examiner by Gabe Kaminsky. The title of the article, and this is something you should read, is Disinformation Incorporated. Meet the groups hauling in cash to secretly blacklist conservative news. This is something I can even personally attest to. You used to work at the Post Millennial, and we got downranked because, hey, guess what? We're a conservative news outlet, right? So, 44. An IG report shows the GEC was initially obligated $98.7 million, of which roughly $80 million came from the Pentagon, right? That's the DoD. It reportedly gave to at least 39 different organizations whose names were redacted. Why is that list secret? See, that's interesting. That's an interesting point here. This is from the Office of the Inspector General. They released a statement here. It's an audit of the GEC and how it's funding these groups. And yet, all of these organizations, right, apart from, say, a couple of them, the CNA Corporation and the Democracy Council of California, all of them are completely redacted. That is insane. That name redacted. Why don't you weigh in on this?
I would love to get, see who's on that. But one of the things, when did I post this? In my, the last, the Disinfogate Part 2 on the Foreign Malign Influence Center. I didn't go into it, but in the 2020 National Defense Authorization Act, it's something I haven't tweeted on yet. But inside that bill, they literally they set up. Let's see, I have it up right here. They gave this is legislation. This is law. They gave the authority to facilitate an establishment of social media data and threat analysis center, and that is a department that is controlled by the ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, and the Defense Department. And what they were given the authority to do in this 2020 National Defense Authorization Act was give out grants and contracts to third-party organizations, NGOs, academia, like all these sort of groups that you see are redacted in that last tweet you talked about. But again, we don't know who they are. I think we can assume who some of them are. But yeah, they were given the authority by Congress. This is law that to basically hand out money to third-party research groups, private entities to do all this bulk collection of misinformation on social media and report it and give it right back to the Department of Defense and the Office of Director of National Intelligence. So this is a multi-agency. This is happening in other parts of the government, not just the one that Taibbi's talking about.
Which you've just give you a kind of shout out name redacted, like you, and I said this earlier, you've got your own threads on this and you've been going deep into the censorship across various government departments and various social media platforms, which we'll be covering next week in a space that that'll be all about your threads, and you've got a new drop coming out in a few days as well. So just for anyone that wants to get more insight into this, that will be the highlight of next week's space, where it's going to be pretty detailed.
Yeah. So,
but which tweet are we up to?
Let me add
45. Almost done.
Go ahead, Nate. One more thing. So when I did the last thread on the Foreign Malign Influence Center, that is a center within the Office of Director of National Intelligence. They're basically the thought police. The Office of Director of National Intelligence is the top dog of the intelligence community. They supervise all the however many, dozen or so intelligence agencies like CIA, FBI, DHS, whatnot. So that center, the Foreign Malign Influence Center, was created, but I didn't. When I was doing that thread, I saw this other thing in the National Defense Authorization Act that set up this basically this establishment between the ODNI and the Department of Defense that gave them the authority to give grants or contracts to third-party research groups to do exactly what basically this Matt Taibbi thread is talking about. So I think a lot of that funding that started in 2020. So
cool.
Yes, it's not just it's not just Big Brother we're worried about. It's all the little sisters, right? It's the little sisters, and these organizations, these think tanks that are compiling lists of Americans, of wrong thinkers, they're the little sisters.
So this tweet number 44 says it was funded by the Pentagon, so that's part of what was in the legislation I talked about.
Yep, that's right. So let's go to 45 now. Twittercom's official Ian Plunkett wrote years ago that misinformation, like countering violent extremism or CVE before it, is becoming a cottage industry. This is something even I've talked about, right? So disinformation is the counterterrorism mission rebranded for domestic targets, right? Reauthorization for GEC's funding is up for a vote this year. This is 2023, right? This is something Matt is saying. Can we at least stop paying to blacklist ourselves? He asked a question. It's a pretty damn good question. So the hashtag Twitter files were prepared by a third party, so material may have been left out. Thanks to Schellenberger, right? Michael Schellenberger and the team at Racket News, who will have more on this all month. So this is not the end of it. I would suggest people stay tuned to what Matt Taibbi and the rest of the team is putting out. And it says, note, before publication, Graham Bookry of the DFR lab wrote to clarify about the 40,000 Indian names. Quote, we didn't publish this from a former researcher because we lacked confidence in its findings. This is an email that was sent to Matt Taibbi. And Matt Taibbi asked if he'd made this lack of confidence clear to the Reuters reporter, whose story is based on that research, is still live, right? It's uncorrected online. Well, the guy didn't respond. He didn't reply. So, 50. For more on these and other Twitter Files topics, follow Michael Schellenberger, follow myself, and I'll be testifying in the House on Thursday. Holy crap. So Matt Taibbi will be testifying.
We're gonna cover this live for sure.
Yeah. So Jim Jordan and the House Judiciary Committee have invited him, and he'll be talking. And by the way, he... to answer the question earlier from Ravi, there is a full list of the India accounts. So that's is after number 50. God. So you want to check his thread. Yep, the full list is there. Excellent. So hey, send it to your government. Send it to your government, man. You got the full list of it. It's a gigantic XLSX file. It's a spreadsheet. It's on Dropbox, so I suggest downloading it right now and sending it over. Yeah.
Yeah, 36,000 names.
Excellent. I don't know if you saw the Indian Minister for Information Technology, Rajiv. He just tweeted that out, Matt's entire thread to the entire country. So thank you so much for today. I really, I'll just send that to you. You can retweet too. So thank you so much for bringing this. This is a huge, huge, huge piece of missing link that all of us were waiting for. I'm so grateful to you and Mario and to Matt and everybody else. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I see it. Yeah, I'm just going to retweet him too. Well, guys,
it's going
have a conversation. Well. Yeah, I mean, this is huge. This is multinational.
What impact is it going to? Actually, I'm going to ask a question to Ravi. What impact do you think that will have? What are you going to do with the list?
It's going to have a very, very serious impact because, unlike many other countries, India has been very strongly looking at social media doing a lot of work around Meta, around Facebook, and of
it's
course
going to be looking
Twitter.
at. Sorry,
and we've been
hold on, Ravi.
It's going to be looking.
Can
It is
you
going
hear
to be really looking at.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. You just dropped out for a bit. Now
Yeah,
there's a bit of a lag.
I think
Go
the
ahead.
timing. Yeah, can you hear me? So the timing is
Yeah, I
perfect,
can hear you.
right? Because India is finalizing its social media information technology rules right now. I can send you a link. So this is the time when we've been really looking at demanding more accountability. And there's, unlike other parts of the world, Indians are obsessed. I'm telling you, we are like you guys obsessed. You have no idea amount of obsession Indians have with Twitter. In different languages, we speak different languages. So Twitter has a very strong impact in the political analysis, political discussion in India, right? Because we have no TikTok, right? And Insta is like completely entertainment crap. Sorry for my language. So I think the IT minister, who's very savvy, the fact that he picks up Matt's, Twitter file today for the first time, and he tweets it to everybody, and it's going to be taken up in a very. You'll see that all over, all over media tomorrow. In fact, I've been already asked 2-3 Hindi and English media, and maybe I'm going to ask some of you to be part of that, to really speak this up. We needed some concrete evidence because we know that Jack's the shit and his team were really, really negative, and they were doing this conspiracy. Now, the fact that this exposure is coming out is going to be huge. It doesn't just not have an implication for Twitter in India, but all the social media companies. And I really feel that in a positive way, I think all of us want these companies to do well. And I think what we demand is transparency, honesty, and really like an inclusive, honest space. And like you said, censorship is fine if there is a need, but you cannot outrightly just censor all the Hindu handles, all the far right handles, because we are speaking against some insanity. Right. So, and again, BJP, which is the ruling and democratically elected, government for the second time, and hopefully, and the biggest implication, really, Mario and Ian, this will have is because we are preparing for 2024. One of the biggest elections on this planet, right? And the fact that you're getting more and more evidence out there. Yeah, it's going to have very, very strong implications.
And more so than that, this has geopolitical implications, because keep in mind, the people demanding this censorship came from the U.S. government. It was U.S. government funded. They demanded that these accounts be censored. So keep that in mind when you talk to them. Like the U.S. government has been meddling in Indian politics.
Ravi, just one quick thing. Can you go through? I sent you through a screenshot. Justin did a list of the top 20 accounts based on the number of followers, and I've just sent you through that screenshot. Can you have a look at it? Any of those accounts that you know? Check out your DM now. I'd be curious.
Okay.
DM on Twitter. Slayman, jump in, and then Maze before we wrap up the space. Yeah, and I'm very curious, Ravi, if you know any of them. Slayman?
Yeah, I've got a couple of points to make. One from earlier and one based on what Ravi just said. So in terms of what was said earlier, the difference between censorship in Russia and censorship in the West is, in Russia or any of these countries where the rules are a lot more stringent, you know what the requirements are, and then you know how to navigate through them. The problem you have in the West is that when the censorship's occurring, we're given the illusion of free speech. And so when we're given this illusion, we're not able to plan in an effective manner. So people can make career choices, they can make business choices, they can make academic choices. And then when your free speech is curtailed, or you get in trouble, or you lose your job or career, whatever it may be, the impact is much more significant. So even though there may be a scenario where the rules from a visual or from a
but losing your job and career is not the government, though. It's just the cancel culture, which is a different discussion.
No, it's not just that. It's not just that, though, because it's a much larger thing. When the government institutes something, puts you on a list, corporations are obliged to act upon it. That's the issue.
And also what we've seen from these is this: the government who's actually helping with this cancellation, helping with these, with the direction of thought, both within culture as well as through media.
Yeah. So this is okay. Well, there's two discussions here from complete censorship versus creating a narrative, which I know they overlap a lot. Go ahead.
I just had a thought. What if we make an Indian space soon, like next week or something, to talk about this? Because, obviously developments will happen. The Indian government is going to act upon this, and there are going to be a lot of implications. I think it'd be great for us to
Ravi,
Indian audience.
Are you up for this, Ravi? What do you think? Ravi? You're muted, Ravi.
He's probably checking the files. And my second point was actually to Ravi, so until he gets back to you. The issue is this. Look, we've got obviously this list of people from India who've been blocked. And I think whatever the situation was previously, and we have a similar situation now, it's the same issue that what is the basis or what is the policy behind banning anybody? So, for example, if it is, for example, Ravi said, right-wing ideologies, and for example, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, if all of these things are the litmus test for banning, then that's a policy that needs to be in place and for everybody to know, both in the past and now. So as an example, we know that is the policy right now isn't absolute free speech, because we know people who've been anti-Semitic or have made certain posts that are infringing on people's ideologies have been banned. So
would you say, would you say Twitter has pretty free, not much censorship and pretty much free speech?
Well, I don't know what I prefer actually at the moment. And first of all, I love what Elon Musk is generally doing, so I don't want to sound contradictory in my next point. But in the past, it seems like they were very stringent on anything that could be considered
true.
speech.
That's fair.
They banned a lot of feminists.
True.
They banned feminists who criticize transgender ideology, and obviously
but
Elon has
would
listed
you
all
say
those
would you say now Twitter is not censored or very little censorship?
So I'd say the censorship is decreased, but then the problem with the decrease is what's the basis of the decrease. So previously I understood what it was, even though I had a problem with it. So it was basically anyone who was right-wing, not right-wing, but alt-right ideas were basically banned, and hence this Twitter files that have came out are not shocking to me. Or somebody who basically was, basically terrorist ideas. For example, Islamic extremists were basically banned. If it was, like you said, extreme ideas in other parts, they were banned. But now the question is, what is the policy? What is the fundamental policy that's outlaying everything that's happening?
Well, it seems, but now it seems. Would you say I think we all agree that Twitter
it's still murky, Mario. People are still getting banned for misgendering, for example. Yeah,
it's just too murky now.
It's not perfect, but would you? Yeah, murky. But would you say the censorship is significantly improved?
It's better for sure. It's better for sure.
It feels better for sure. Like I'm posting things which I think maybe I'd get banned for previously. So definitely, it feels
we also know why when someone gets, unless there's obviously a glitch or a mistake, we generally know why people. There's a fair bit of transparency. Also, Elon's going to open up where we know why someone's been suspended, etc. Okay, so we have the transparency, because I know, Simon, you're making the point that
I don't think
you
it's
just don't know.
Though, Mario, like what is the policy that's got year banned, for example, and then equal or similar level accounts which are probably propagating similar ideas or not?
So I don't know who that is. Oh, Kanye West.
Yeah. So what's the policy that got him banned, but then at the same time, similar levels of...
Isn't it hate speech?
So, but that's my point. That's my point. I don't think that's a complete policy that's happening throughout, because there's a lot of hate speech that's occurring that isn't banned. My point is this. I'm saying Twitter feels much better for sure. Like, I know I would probably get banned in the previous regime. My point is this, that I want good policies in place that we all know that what we're working towards. So, for example, now Ravi, the Indian list, like...
But hold on, but going back to Kanye, didn't Elon himself say why, the CEO of the company say why Kanye got suspended? No?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he was on our face when he explained it.
Yeah, I watched that where you guys were on, and I felt like what he said...
So I don't know, you asked a question. You asked a question, Slayman. You asked a question, Slayman, on why you got suspended. But I'm just saying, the CEO of the company himself said why you got suspended.
No, that's not my point.
Well, the issue is it's unevenly distributed.
I'm saying, what's the policy which underlies that decision that is applied to...
Yeah, why aren't other people getting banned, right? I mean, the issue is Twitter's enforcement of policies right now is very hit and miss. There are people who do spout threats and they don't get banned for it. And there's other people who might misgender someone and still get banned for it. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. And this is something that, obviously is a work in progress. We can't expect everything to change overnight. They do have to change a lot of people working at Twitter, because, the moderators, whether they're ideologically driven or whether they've simply been trained to behave in a certain way, they're banning people based on, an ideological stance, banning people from misgendering, for example. criticizing transgender ideology. That is still kind of happening, not as much as it used to. So I would say it's a work in progress and that we should just give it time. That's my opinion, but it is something that needs to be addressed. Like, we can't just like sweep it under the carpet and say everything's okay. Just because it's getting better, it doesn't mean it's all completely okay. There's still problems with Twitter
That's
that need to be
completely
addressed.
fair. I think you made a very fair assessment.
The point I wanted to make, Simon, the reason I was asking those questions, like, okay, but Twitter is, and I don't want to kind of open up that rabbit hole, go down that rabbit hole again, but Twitter's banned in Russia and allowed in the US and the West. So just really wanted to make that point, and it's one of many websites. But I think that's a debate for the next censorship
because like
space.
Ravi explained that TikTok's banned in India, so many countries make policy decisions based on banning certain.
Yeah, I'm generally a believer of one simple policy, and that applies to Elon, that applies to Putin, that applies to Xi Jinping, that applies to anybody. It applies to some institutions here in the US. It's social media platforms, especially in the West, and Apple by far the biggest. Any centralization of power is dangerous, even if the centralization is within good hands. Because good people, I think Lex Friedman and Joe Rogan were talking about this. Good people, and they gave Elon as example. Even Elon could be corrupted. Any good person could be corrupted. It's really or if not Elon, when Elon is no longer at the helm of Twitter, is no longer with us, who's going to take over? So could be a country with a great, incredible president that has complete centralization of power. There's examples of countries that have achieved incredible growth under a president that had, was authoritarian, but eventually that president will be replaced by someone else, and you cannot, and it just takes one person to not have good intentions or be a psychopath or whatever it is. There's no system to counter that. So my argument is always centralization of power is never a good thing. And I think Elon knows that. Elon's decentralizing Twitter. That's part of his roadmap, which is why I don't criticize the centralization of power here. So that's usually my take, and I think it would be good for a deeper discussion.
Yeah, brilliant. And so just the final point I was making was from what you guys have gone through in terms of the Twitter files, and based on what the policy decisions were of the previous regime, it's quite clear why a lot of those people on the Indian list were banned, because obviously it's based on the ideologies and ideas.
Cool, man. I appreciate your take.
It was crazy. I'm just drilling through this. I'm drilling through this 36,000 list they have here, and I mean they're like 100 verified accounts, and they've got the geolocation. They've got all this information. In fact, I'm a little suspect that some of this data wasn't like primed and matched by Twitter itself. But I'm maybe they could pull this straight off.
And that list of people that were suspended or shadow banned, or what exactly?
Well, this is the list of 36,000, 44,000, whatever, related to India for some reason. The India accounts full list, and I'm like, what?
Oh my God,
they got like a Justin Bieber fan account in here, and they've got some guy who's running for Congress in Arizona. It's crazy. Like, it's nonsense.
We'll go to Maze and then Patrick to kind of finish it off. And I don't know if Piotr want to add anything as well at the end. But Maze, go ahead. And we do want to quickly final words, everyone, just because I do want to wrap it up. We have another space in 5 hours that we've been planning for 2 weeks. The China space. So go ahead, Maze.
I'll be real quick. Thank you, Mario.
Shout out, by the way, shout out to Maze and her spaces. I've seen you every day hustling with your spaces. So really well
fantastic.
Done.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be very quick. I just want to highlight that, the World Economic Forum, you guys know that's kind of where I've been hyper-focused most recently, is that this, disinformation, the legal aspect of it that you brought up, name redacted, what's happening is like the private organizations are coming and drafting up the policies, drafting up the white papers, and they're passing them off to the prominent officials around the world to get passed as law. And so they're creating these public-private partnerships to be able to, I guess, they call it tackling disinformation, but we just saw that there's like, one was the attack on kind of the Russian disinformation. So to create maybe a what did he call it? He said it in his speech, like Russia-phobia. And then we saw this with India. And so to me, it's like, is there an attack on BRICS? Is this kind of like a unipolar type of move to kind of, attack anything with the BRICS nations? That's just something I wanted to throw out. And then there was something else, but it was a long time ago, so I'll just let that go since we're making it quick. But thanks for having me on here, and yeah, that's it.
Absolutely.
Thanks, mate.
Those are some great questions, and those are some great points. I mean, this is something that, again, we need to talk about, right, Mario? Like next week, let's do an India space and talk about the implications.
Yeah, I've already told my team. Ravi, someone from my team will reach out to you today to connect you so we connect on WhatsApp and discuss the potential Indian space.
We can get the information minister. We can get him on next week's space.
Yeah, Ravi, you got to hustle for this, bro. If you want to do this, you got to hustle, Ravi. Yeah, let's get Modi himself on the. We'll go to Patrick.
Let's get that Justin Bieber fan account too. And
yeah, we should get some of the top names on that list. Patrick, and then Ravi, and then Piotr. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, hey, on that policy debate, that's a really good point, because you've got two things. You've got community guidelines, which are sort of universally enforced, or, policy guidelines and so forth. Twitter and Facebook. Don't forget Facebook is a big part of this conversation. Then the other, they have reactive takedowns and reactive censorship. And what we found in you studying the different countries, it usually reflects the party in power. Will it be able to exert some pressure on the local regional corporate office? Because you have to remember, like Facebook, for instance, is advertising sales is one of their main, revenues aside from selling data. But so they won't take a left or right wing line. They'll take the line of wherever the pressure is coming from politically. So, and it was also, I think The Intercept reported that Israel pressured Facebook to take down a load of Palestinian Facebook accounts, like thousands of them, I think. And then Chile, when the right-wing government was in power, they were taking down opposition accounts. So it varies from country to country because of the business. They want stay access to the markets. So I don't know about Twitter, but I know that's been the case with Facebook. So
and I also want to make so just to kind of balance it out. I don't know if I tweeted about it, but someone sent it through. That censorship exists on both sides of the political spectrum. Obviously, in the US, and the West has been more on the left because the social media platforms are leaning left. But there's an article I'll try to find it quickly, and I'll mention it.
Speech, the right wing in the United States is constitutionalist. It's very different from the right wing elsewhere, which is, I would argue, to be more authoritarian. There are benefits to being authoritarian. Obviously, you get stuff done. But in the West, right? Not the West necessarily, but in the United States, it's constitutionalist, right? They're more libertarian when it comes to suppressing other people. They don't believe in that.
There's, but I just want to say that there is an article of, I think it was Fox News or somebody intentionally censoring and sending requests to censor people on the left. I'm not trying to find the exact article that someone sent me in either.
Are you talking about that one Twitter files drop where there was a State Department official that was like demanding censorship of various people he claimed to be Russian? The guy's a Republican.
No, something related to Fox News. I'll find it and like mention it at the end of the space if I manage to find it. But I don't want to sit there kind of trying to look for it. But Ravi, any final quick words before we go to Piotr?
No, I think one, that totally on for trying to bring the minister. I'll speak to him myself. Second, just another piece, because misinformation, disinformation will always happen, and people will keep attempting this. I've been supporting an NGO in India which is reaching out, and we're going to do digital skills and digital safety for about 10 million students, because we realize that if you're looking at more and more young people coming, they can get totally disenchanted and overwhelmed by this entire experience. So how do you really address it from an education and from a skilling perspective? Because, social media is going to have more avatars and more, forms in the coming years. I mean, just the fact that Twitter, big Twitter, whatever the new idea of Twitter will be, India has 40% of the UPIs, right? So if you're looking at Twitter becoming the space for various market and discussion and so on and so forth, you want to make sure that people who are participating are skilled in the right way. So that's another piece, that Rajiv has been focusing is while we can do a lot in terms of rules, but how do you really get citizens to really engage in a positive, but also careful way, which is safe and responsible on both sides. So that's the final thought. Again, thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Your mic is horrible, Ravi, but I'll let you finish this time. Made an exception. I appreciate you being here. Piotr, final words?
Yeah, I think there's a slight irony here in that, we were talking about freedom of expression and the suppression of the left, but then sort of when I'm trying to speak, it was the suppression of me from certain people. So I think we need to be consistent.
Wow, you're kind of whiny.
No, I'm sorry, but it's
Very, yeah, that was whiny. Like, Piotr, Piotr, just to let you know,
anyway, for the topic of the room.
Well, hold on.
I'm just going to move on. I'm just going to move on.
No, I'm not gonna let you. I'm not gonna let you move on, bro. I'm not gonna let you move on because I'm the one who always invites you. I've got a lot of respect for you, and I love you on the stage. But it's nice to disagree with you as well. I got heated with Ian, by the way. I'll make my point. I'll make my point. You made a point. Now I'll let you move on. I got heated with Ian, but you always do this. You gotta always come back and then wind about. We know, man. We know what happened. I don't think it's censorship. I think it's people getting emotional. I don't think Ian blocked you. I don't think he banned you from the space.
I didn't do anything.
I don't think he even kicked you off, and he didn't even mute you. By the way, I thought he did mute you. It turns out I glitched. So anyway, but a valid point. I wouldn't consider it censorship. I just consider it people getting heated. But yeah, I'd love you to wrap up the space because we were on the same side of the argument earlier today. So
yeah, I'm not trying to be petty. I'm just acknowledging it. Anyway, as I said, I think this conversation is important. I think we're going through a transitional time when it comes to big tech, governments. We're seeing power shift between different platforms and entities. Musk doesn't even know what he's to do with Twitter. And I think at the end of the day, though, I think some other people have said it. These are big companies which are privately owned, and arguably the people can do what they want.
Ian, name someone has their mic unmuted. This feedback sound, so just make sure you mute it, guys. Go ahead, Piotr. Sorry, I think his name. Go ahead, Piotr.
Yeah. So what I'm saying, I mean, look, I don't really have much to say because I joined late and didn't listen to much. But I wouldn't suggest that this is some kind of thing against the BRICS. The BRICS are, a group of countries that are developing at their own way things like CBDCs and an alternative financial model. We've now got to deal with the potential of the US sanctioning China, which will have repercussions. And I think the freedom of expression is an incredibly, I will fight. I love the expression. I don't agree with what you said, but I'll fight to the death to allow you to say it. I think that's incredibly important, and we need to.
Hold on. Where's this quote from? That's a good one.
Gosh, who made the quote? It's like
I wouldn't. What is it? I want to actually write it down. I want to tweet it out. I wouldn't. What is it? I wouldn't. I don't agree with you, but I'll fight to death.
I agree with what you. I may not agree with what you say. But I will fight.
But I defend your right. But I defend your right to say it. That's the
commonly misattributed to Voltaire. He never said that. It's a public quote.
The actual quote is, "I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it."
Oh, there it is. Evelyn Beatrice Hall.
Yeah. So a good
That's
quote.
Such a sexy quote.
To end the space. But anyway, thanks for the space. And see you.
Chris, first time on stage. I thought I'll give you the mic quickly to wrap up a quick point because we want to end the space and we'll get the final words by our hosts, Ian and Name Redacted. Go ahead, Chris. Good to have you.
Awesome. Thank you. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yep.
A lot of this is coming back.
Chris, yeah.
Thank you. A lot of this is coming back from the Smith Modernization Act and misinformation, disinformation push that also was initiated with the Integrity Initiative from England as well as the United States. It's being run through the State Department. It's all about national security, not 230, and they're framing it to make it look like it's Russian crap, but it's really to keep the narrative down. I gave some documents to Maze to share with you guys. Thanks.
Perfect. Yeah, please do DM me anything you have. We're going to be doing a big space on censorship in a few days, as I said. So as for everyone, we do have a big space in 5 hours, 4 hours and 50 minutes about the China-US tension. It's going to be one of my favorite spaces. I'm really excited for it. I think Piotr's going to be there. I think Ian's going to be there. I haven't looked at the list yet. I think Justin's going to be there. Patrick, maybe. I can't remember. But Ian, Name Redacted, guys. Final words before we say goodbye to everyone.
Okay, so I will just say, right, that this drop here is perhaps much larger than any of the previous drops, not just in terms of quantity and volume, but the geopolitical implications in this. It involves India, right? Make no mistake, India is, 1.5 or 1.7 billion people who are effectively being suppressed by the US government, right? This is what's going on, and we have to ask these questions. Not just us, but the Indian government should be asking these questions. Like, what led to the, suppression or attempted suppression of BJP accounts. This has to be answered, and obviously Twitter has played a massive part in the suppression under the previous regime. Under Elon Musk, obviously not. You fired 90% of these guys, but the previous regime under Vijay Gadde suppressed these accounts, and for the longest time, India has been trying to fight back against this kind of censorship of its people. And now we have evidence, apparently, right, that the U.S. government funded an organization, or at least is part of the U.S. government, in fact, tried to suppress these accounts, tried to suppress Indians from having their political views expressed online. Why is that? Why were they targeted? I think people need to start talking about it. This is more than just the suppression of Americans, right? This is massively international, right? And it shows that there's this massive overreach among the state apparatus in the United States to control and manipulate other countries in the world. It's denied doing so, but clearly here we see it happening. And so that needs to be addressed completely on an international level. Cannot be, they can't let this, be swept under the rug. It's not cool.
Name?
Okay, so, aside from what Ian mentioned about India, a lot of the thread also focused on bots or Russian, accounts in France, in Italy, and then obviously in the U.S. But the common theme that I keep seeing in this is actually a really good thread because it focuses sort of on the macro picture of what the government is doing. And just pay attention to every instance where they're putting lists of accounts to suspend or these requests. It all comes back to one thing. They use the excuse of Russia disinformation and blame it on Russia influence activities or any other excuse they can make. And that's something I'm going to touch upon in the thread next, or in the space next week on censorship. And I sort of summarize a little bit of lay the groundwork in the thread up in the nest, the Disinfogate Part 2 of this Foreign Malign Influence Center. But to quickly wrap up, the government, the intelligence community has to focus on foreign threats. Okay, so they can't make requests to social media to suspend or take down posts unless they can have some sort of foreign connection. They have to say it's a foreign sponsored disinformation. Okay, but what we're seeing here in this thread by Matt Taibbi today is every single thing that they're pointing out and accounts to take down, they're labeling it as Russia disinformation. And that is how the government or these, that's how they're basically using as an excuse to censor domestic accounts, which they cannot be doing. That's illegal. So that's the point I guess I want to make, but it's still going on. You have the Foreign Malign Influence Center up at the top. And that's basically the head of the thought police in the United States right now. That the Foreign Malign Influence Center is basically the DHS Disinformation Governance Board in a new name under a different agency, and that's still going on today. And we'll talk more about that next week, of course.
Oh, thank you everyone for joining. Everyone in the audience, I want to get your thoughts. I know I kind of was making the point about I was trying to make a counter argument to censorship being a bad thing. And I want to try to bring people that can make that argument in the next space. It's an interesting discussion. And I want to try to come up with some examples of where lack of censorship could be very dangerous, because the examples that we have here are not, they're not really good examples of how damaging misinformation could be. So I want to try to get some good examples and get that debate going. It'll be interesting to have. But otherwise, it was a great space. I'll see you all in 5.5 hours. We do have the China-US tensions space, which is one of my favorite topics. And in my opinion, one of the most underrated topics that is not being discussed enough, in my opinion. And I've got a tweet. I think my tweet says, I think the narrative, gender pronouns control the narrative, and I'm responsible for that because I tweeted and did a space about it. And I'm not saying it's not important, but I'm saying controls the narrative. Yet we're facing the biggest nuclear threat or potential for world war, and I'm not over exaggerating, since the Cold War, with tensions with Russia and now tensions with China.
Nukes. Russia just put out a statement today saying they're not going to approach nukes at all. Like, it's not even a question.
Yeah, I think Russia's saying that now. US is saying that, and China's not indicating anything. I was saying that there's, Russia and the US haven't, there haven't been that confrontational since the Cold War, and the US and China relations are not good at all, and the situation with Taiwan. I'll just give you an example with Taiwan. China says, Taiwan, we're going to reunify with Taiwan. We prefer to do it peacefully. I'm paraphrasing. I tweeted the video about this. That's the president, Xi Jinping, saying this. But please mute your mic, whoever's unmuted. But we will not discount the possibility of using military force. And other officials have said we are ready to use military force. And then Biden, when asked, hey, if Taiwan gets attacked, would you send troops or would you use military force to support Taiwan? And he said yes. So you got China said, hey, we'll take Taiwan and we are ready to use force. The US saying we'll protect Taiwan and we're ready to use force. So
that's pretty bad.
it is pretty bad. And I think it's
what the hell is Biden doing?
It's a whole debate. But I think it's even deeper than just Biden. It goes back decades and decades ago with the murkiness of the one China policy, and I think we're gonna see this issue continue. And I think it's a very complex issue, and how microchips play a big role in it. It's just fascinating. It's a fascinating topic, and it's a very concerning one. Maybe time to finally get my little bunker and then prep for the end of the world. All right, cool. Everyone, thank you so much. In Name Redacted, thank you so much for hosting the space. Speakers, thanks a lot for joining, and we'll see you all in 5.5 hours. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Thank you.